Chapter 473. Roars and screams could be heard from afar. It seemed that the people outside had once again fallen into the fear and madness from before. The cracks on the walls were still slowly expanding, and the rocks that kept falling caused the ground to tremble. It was a particularly frightening scene. Rumble! Suddenly a loud sound was heard. It was from the entrance of the stone chamber. A huge rock, shattered into pieces and scattered on the ground. In the midst of the rock fragments swirling, a figure swiftly swept in, his face full of anxiety. It was Ghost King. Once Ghost King entered the stone chamber, he looked at the platform. Ghostly was already guarding beside Baiyao. Although the quakes were strong and rocks kept falling from the top of the chamber, but with Ghostly's movements, all the rocks that landed within the range of the platform were sent flying by him. Ghost King heaved a sigh of relief, calmed down slightly, but his face did not relax. His eyes turned and saw Mr. Ghost was also at the other side of the stone chamber, frowned and said to Mr. Ghost, "What are you doing here, still not going?" Speaking halfway, Ghost King suddenly stopped. Mr. Ghost seemed to understand, nodded his head. His body moved, looked like he was about to leave, but suddenly thought of something. His eyes turned to the ground, that jade plate, unknown if it should be called astrolabe or Qian Kuan reincarnation plate, quietly lying on the ground. Mr. Ghost took a step towards the plate, suddenly felt a sharp gaze behind him, extremely cold. He slowly turned back. It was Ghostly, who had casually struck a falling stone. His eyes were staring at him. Mr. Ghost was silent for a moment, did not move forward, and then swept out of the stone chamber. His black figure like an apparition flashed a few times, and then disappeared. Right now only Ghostly and Ghost King were left in the stone chamber. Ghost King glanced at the jade plate on the ground, looked at Ghostly, was silent for a moment, wanted to speak but stopped, instead sighed softly. Regardless of why Mr. Ghost was here, Ghostly brought the jade plate to this cold stone chamber. Naturally it was to save Baiyao, and right now, without asking, he knew that Baiyao did not seem to be getting better. Ghost King quietly walked to the other side of the platform. Coincidentally, a piece of rock above him could not hold on any longer and fell down. Ghost King lightly waved his hand. That piece of rock, as if it received a heavy blow, flew out diagonally in the air. A deafening sound rushed to the stone wall beside, smashed into pieces. Ghostly glanced at Ghost King, did not speak. The two men stood quietly beside the sleeping girl, patiently and thoroughly guarding her. Baiyao still had a faint smile on her face. Maybe in her heart there was some happiness. Another half a cup of tea's time had passed, but this strange earthquake still showed no signs of stopping. On the contrary, that mysterious force carrying a thick stench of blood rampaged underground. Both Ghost King and Ghostly were highly skilled. They could clearly feel that this force was not an ordinary earthquake, but had spirituality. It felt like a trapped giant beast, roaring furiously, trying to struggle free of its shackles and chains. For that, even if it destroyed the heaven and earth, it did not care. Outside the stone chamber, because the stone door was destroyed by Ghost King, the frenzied roars and screams of the Ghost King sect disciples were heard, becoming louder and more ear-piercing. Ghost King's expression gradually turned agitated, anger also gradually surfaced on his face. Ghostly, who was standing beside, felt Ghost King's state of mind had changed, glanced at him. His heart was shocked. Ghost King's facial muscles contorted slightly, looking ferocious, totally different from his usual demeanor, and in his eyes, a layer of dark red color suddenly surfaced, as if a faint red glow was flowing in his eyes. Ghostly was surprised. Ghost King also looked over. Their eyes met. Ghost King suddenly sneered. His voice cold, indifferently said, "What are you looking at?" Ghostly met his gaze, did not have any intention of retreating, also indifferently said, "Nothing." Ghost King's eyes froze, coldness shot out from his eyes, stared at Ghostly. The originally relaxed atmosphere, suddenly for some reason became tense again, but at this moment, after a strong tremor, both of them felt the mysterious power under their feet suddenly receding. As expected, after a moment, the ground and the surrounding walls swiftly stopped shaking. the stones falling like rain also finally stopped, that strange stench of blood in the air also quietly dissipated. Ghostly gently heaved a sigh of relief, looked towards the cold stone platform. Bai Yao was lying there safe and sound, quietly smiling and sleeping. Then, Ghostly turned to look at Ghost King. Ghost King was also quietly watching Bai Yao. The anger and indistinct murderous look on his face quietly disappeared. In this world, maybe only when he was looking at his only beloved daughter, could Ghost King wake up from his anger, calm down. Ghost King looked at Bai Yao for a long while, his eyes filled with affection, then slowly moved his eyes away, quietly said, "Take good care of her." Ghostly nodded, said, "I will." Ghost King turned and strode out. Soon his figure disappeared. Ghostly stood for a while. The corner of his eyes glanced at the ground. That jade plate was still lying on the ground. Stones were falling, but strangely, not a single stone hit the jade plate. Ghostly walked over, picked up the jade plate from the ground, carefully studied it for a while, took out the black cloth from his bosom, and put it back. Outside the stone room, the roars gradually quietened down, but after the calamity, the noises were still rising and falling. Evidently there were still many who had not awoken from the fear. Ghostly frowned. His eyes slowly looked at the surrounding ruins. After this round of violent destruction, the stone room that was already cracked was even more scarred. What was different from the previous time was that not only were the stone walls in the room severely damaged, but this time around, even the ground where one stepped on had started to have rather large cracks. Some places had even been torn into quite a deep pit. The cold stone room was already in such a state. The tunnel outside and where the Ghost King's sect disciples were at, one could imagine the devastation. The moaning sounds from afar seemed to be the best footnote to this. Ghost Lee's eyes gradually turned sharp, walked to a crack in the wall, quietly but carefully looked, and then, with his brows tightly frowned, stretched out one hand and felt up and down the crack. Small stones, following the movement of his hand, fell down, bounced a few times on the ground and rolled to the corner. Ghostly slowly retracted his arm. Then, he made a strange action. He placed his palm in front of his nose and sniffed it lightly, as if he was smelling something strange. His eyes became even sharper and brighter. This strange force had appeared twice after he returned to Majestic Fox Mountain, coincidentally when he was using the Qian Kuan reincarnation plate to save Bai Yao. To say it had nothing to do with it was really unjustifiable, since it was related to his most important matter of saving Bai Yao. Then he could no longer stay out of it. Deep inside the cave, the blood pool, the raging four divinities' blood formation had already calmed down, although the air above the blood pool was still filled with a thick stench of blood, but the light rings emitted from the hidden dragon cauldron were no longer fluctuating. Mr. Ghost stood alone on the platform, looked up at the hidden dragon cauldron floating in the air, in the red light flickering in the sky. His eyes instead stared intently at that white light pillar on the evil demon face on the ancient cauldron. The white pillar of light that was shaped like a sharp light dagger was much brighter than the one he had seen before, and its diameter seemed to be thicker as well. With this, that evil face became even more distorted, not to mention the red light, which was almost completely red, was forced to the lower half. Right now, looking at it, even that little bit of red had dimmed, a feeling that it could not be maintained. Just that Mr. Ghost looked at this unfavorable situation. His eyes did not have the anxiousness and urgency before, instead more of a kind of joy. After a long time he suddenly laughed quietly said, as expected it is related to that astrolabe. His figure moved, walked forward, stopped when he reached the end of the platform and then stretched out his body to look at the blood pool below, saw four huge spiritual beasts soaked in the blood, all looking weak and exhausted. Clearly these ancient spiritual beasts' vital energies were completely absorbed by this four divinities' blood formation set up by Mr. Ghost. And around the hidden dragon cauldron, the energies were unusually abundant, turned into red lights, circling the cauldron incessantly. The hidden dragon cauldron was also flickering with light, as if responding to these energies. Just that at the most crucial throat area, The light dagger on that evil face blocked the energy channel, causing the surrounding energies to be unable to enter the cauldron, making it difficult for the blood formation to be completed. Mr. Ghost looked at this scene, his eyes behind the black veil slightly narrowed. His eyes revealed a contemplative look, his palms clasped together, subconsciously tapping lightly. Clearly he was thinking about something. And at this moment, a sound of clothes flapping was heard from behind the platform. Mr. Ghost immediately sensed it, turned around. Ghost King's face was dark, walking over. Ghost King could not be bothered to be courteous, directly asked Mr. Ghost, "What is going on? Why did the blood formation's spiritual energy go out of control so badly?" Mr. Ghost slowly glanced at that light dagger on the cauldron, indifferently said, "This unusual earthquake is because of the Azura divine power contained in the four divinities' blood formation. It has its own spiritual energy to struggle free from the divine spell Qian Kuan Lok, struggling with all its might. In the meantime it also triggered the ferocious blood energy here, as well as the spiritual energy of the giant beasts absorbed by the blood formation, the three powers acting up. That is why there is such earth-shaking and mountain-shaking power." Ghost King coldly snorted, also glanced up, said, "Sounds nice. Why is it that the earth-shaking and mountain-shaking still can't do anything to a small light pillar?" Mr. Ghost indifferently said, "If the ancient divine prohibition is so easy to remove, it would not be an ancient divine method." Anger flashed past Ghost King's face, coldly said, "I don't want to hear so much. Do you have any way to remove this bullshit Qian Kuan Lok?" Mr. Ghost was silent for a moment, suddenly laughed quietly and said, "It was originally very tricky, but now—" He slowly looked up at Ghost King, said, "There is a way." Ghost King was shocked, asked in astonishment, "What, you found a way?" Mr. Ghost slowly nodded but did not directly say what the way was, instead turned around, looked at that unsophisticated hidden dragon cauldron floating above his head, after staring for a long while, softly said, "Bear with it a while more, the time for you to be born will not be too far." In the air, the red light on the hidden dragon cauldron flickered incessantly, as if it had spirituality, quietly watching the people below. Chapter 474. Inside the Ghost King sect cave, it was a mess. The earthquake this time was much stronger than before, and that strange mysterious power seemed to be even more terrifying. More than 10 of the Ghost King sect disciples went berserk at the same time, although in the end these crazy disciples were still killed one by the sober ones, but the casualties were also more than 10. More importantly, these people who had died, no matter if they had gone mad or died in battle, were all their companions. Many of them had even been fighting together or chatting with each other a moment ago, but in the next moment they had already become mortal enemies. This was a cruel and horrifying matter, especially to the Ghost King sect disciples who had finally gotten 10 days of peace. The madness and fear that descended again, and this time it was 10 times more than before, had already made everyone's nerves stretch to the extreme. Not long after the violent earthquake, finally someone who wanted to escape appeared. There were not many who escaped, only one, and it was also not an important person, just an ordinary Ghost King sect disciple, had been in Ghost King sect for less than 3 years. And Ghost King sect was a branch of the evil sect. Right now they even considered themselves as the leader of the holy sect. The evil sect's various kinds of cruel punishments, how would it be lacking? This disciple who escaped was very quickly caught and severely punished, but that shadow that shrouded everyone's hearts and the suffocating atmosphere could not be removed. Not knowing when it started, everyone was silent. The huge Ghost King sect was in a dead silence. Those who could not speak would not speak. The road was clear. Under the suffocating silence, what exactly was surging? Under such circumstances, the leader of the Ghost King sect, the Ghost King of the first branch, still remained silent. After shocking everyone by executing the fleeing disciples of the Ghost King sect, he was still as mysterious and reclusive as before. No one knew what this once great and bold overlord was thinking. Was he also affected by the terrifying power and went crazy, or was he plotting something else in his heart? Anyway, nobody knew. But Ghostly could clearly feel this strange atmosphere. In fact, as long as one was slightly clear-headed and rational, they could clearly see the abnormality in the chaos in Ghost King's sect. Just that, Ghostly had no intention to do anything about this situation. To him, Bai Yao came first. And right now the most important thing seemed to be that mysterious power that repeatedly appeared when he was saving Bai Yao, before he returned this time. He had never felt such a mysterious power in majestic Fox Mountain, so evil and terrible, completely not like the power of the human world. Just that he secretly searched the Ghost King sect caves up and down, other than the cracks and cracked ground everywhere. He did not find anything. Now, there was only one place that he had not searched, the Ghost King's residence. However, before Ghostly could think of a way to search for the Ghost King's residence, someone came looking for him. Because the earthquake that day was violent, to the extent that many of the rocks above the passageways fell down, these days, other than the few times Ghostly went out to search, he usually stayed in the cold stone room. Even if he went out, he would try his best to rush back. He was not afraid of anything, but he was afraid of another violent earthquake like this. If he was not by Bai Yao's side, the rocks fell and hurt Bai Yao, then it would really be an irreparable hatred. Right now the Ghost King sect cave was obviously not a safe place. Ghostly thought of these dangers the day after the earthquake, spoke to Ghost King on this point towards his daughter. Ghost King naturally did not dare to be careless. Just that in the rush, he was unable to find a suitable place to settle Bai Yao down. Not to mention, Bai Yao's body had been in deep sleep for 10 years. Right now she could not easily leave the cold stone platform, and to move out of the Ghost King sect cave, he still had to find a dry and cold place. That would require time. Helplessly, although Ghostly was anxious but he could only bear with it, Ghost King sent more men to find a suitable place. Ghostly guarded beside Bai Yao day and night. The cold stone room was after all different from the other places. These few days, the cracks around the walls had been repaired in the shortest time possible. Even the stone door at the entrance, a new huge rock, was brought from somewhere and installed. Other than the repair marks were still clear, at least on the outside. The cold stone room was not as terrible as the other places outside. Ghostly leaned against the cold stone platform, sat on the ground, his eyes wandering, drifting around this cold stone chamber. Xiao Hui crouched beside him, looked rather well behaved. In its hands were a few wild fruits that came from nowhere, minding its own business and munching on them. Usually, Ghostly would not bring Xiao Hui to the cold stone room, but the situation was special. He had to stay by Bai Yao's side all day, and could not return to his own residence. Other than that, Ghostly was also suspicious of that mysterious force deep in majestic Fox Mountain. Therefore he did not wish to let Xiao Hui roam around alone, might as well bring it along with him. The white cold air floated up from the stone platform behind him, floated in the air like a thin mist. Ghostly quietly watched the hazy cold white smoke. His eyes gradually blurred. At this moment, the stone door of the icy cold stone room suddenly made a low sound, and then slowly opened. Because it was a newly changed stone door, the sound still sounded shaky. Behind the door, a black figure quietly walked in. It was Mr. Ghost. Ghostly glanced at him, did not speak. The stone door behind Mr. Ghost again slowly closed, isolating this stone room from the outside world. Mr. Ghost slowly walked forward, did not immediately speak to Ghostly, instead looked at Bai Yao, stared for a while, then slowly said, "Miss Bai Yao has become like this, unknowingly. It has already been 10 years. Ghostly's face abruptly tightened. A sharp glint shot out from his eyes at Mr. Ghost. Under the black veil, Mr. Ghost's expression was unknown, but looking at his movements, he did not seem to feel anything. Slowly, Ghostly's eyes slowly retracted, shifted to Bai Yao, looking at her tranquil face with a faint smile. Ghostly suddenly felt a sourness in his heart. A trace of sadness flashed past his face. Mr. Ghost saw Ghostly's expression. A strange glint flashed in his eyes, paused for a moment, and then turned to look at Ghostly, said, "Do you want to save Miss Bai Yao?" Ghostly looked up at Mr. Ghost but did not show much agitation on his face, indifferently said, If you have something to say, then say it. Mr. Ghost did not seem to mind Ghost Lee's indifferent attitude, said, "That day when I used the astrolabe that you brought back, although there was an anomaly, the scene was chaotic, but after thinking about it carefully, it is not that there is no hope to save Miss Baiyao." Ghost Lee's countenance then changed, flipped over and stood up. Xiao Hui saw its master's movements, flicked its tail, jumped twice, climbed up to Ghost Lee's shoulder and then took a bite of the wild fruit in its hand, looked at Mr. Ghost. Under the 5 eyes of Ghost Lee, Xiao Hui, 1 human and 1 monkey, Mr. Ghost paused for a moment, then continued, "According to what I see, this astrolabe treasure is an ancient divine object that has been passed down for a long time but has never appeared before. It is no small matter." Ghostly was surprised, said, "Ancient divine object?" Mr. Ghost nodded his head, said, "According to ancient legend, the ancient deities had passed down several treasures. All of them had inconceivable divine powers, not what humans can control and understand, and this astrolabe treasure should be one of them." He paused, glanced at Ghostly. Ghostly was frowning slightly but was concentrating on listening. The black veil on Mr. Ghost's face moved slightly, said, "According to legend, this astrolabe treasure is mysterious and unfathomable, containing the truths of heaven and earth, containing endless mysteries, able to sever yin and yang, stabilize the soul, peep into the sky. The ancients even said that it can even reach creation, reverse karma and fate. It is really an inconceivable divine weapon." Ghost Lee's thoughts turned rapidly. That day in Tian-Yin Temple, Puhong, Pewed the 2 masters also roughly said, although there were some differences, but clearly this jade astrolabe was not an ordinary object. Could it be that Mr. Ghost really had the ability to save Baiyao? With that thought, Ghost Lee's body also trembled slightly, stepped forward and said, "Mr. Please save her." Mr. Ghost flashed slightly, avoided Ghost Lee's salute, indifferently said, "Miss Baiyao is Ghost King Sect Head's beloved daughter. Old man has received Sect Head's great kindness. If it is possible to save her, naturally I will not refuse." "But—" He wanted to speak but stopped. Ghostly was anxious, said, "Mr. Please speak." Mr. Ghost was silent for a moment, said, "I have said it just now, this treasure is an ancient divine weapon, unfathomable, the various powers within, I have only heard of it. Just that I have been immersed in yin-yang ghost way all my life, I am confident in this soul way, not inferior to anyone in the world. Therefore, as long as the astrolabe treasure really has this ability, I will definitely be able to comprehend it and from there save Baiyao, Mississippi." After Ghostly heard it, this was supposed to be great news, but his reaction was strange. There was no ecstasy. His eyes moved away from Mr. Ghost, turned and looked at the stone platform. After a moment, he slowly turned back, his expression indifferent. His eyes indistinctly had an unexplainable mockery and vigilance, faintly said, "Then Mr.'s meaning is—" Mr. Ghost pondered for a moment, said, "I need time to comprehend the mystery of this astrolabe. If you trust me, and for the sake of saving Miss Baiyao, please lend me the astrolabe temporarily to study. Once I comprehend the mystery, I will definitely rush over to save Miss Baiyao." The corners of Ghost Lee's mouth moved slightly, slowly revealing a trace of a cold smile. His gaze also became somewhat cold. He slowly said, "Then what if I don't trust you?" Mr. Ghost was stunned, for a moment seemed to be stifled, did not know what to say. Ghostly coldly said, "That day outside Qing Yun Hill Tong Tian Peak Founder's Ancestral Hall, that old man was clearly an old friend of yours. You also killed him without even blinking. Between you and me, we have fought several times. Whether we have the intention to kill or not, both of us are very clear in our hearts. As what you said, this astrolabe is really that mystical. Firstly, it concerns the important matter of saving Baiyao. Secondly, this magical weapon is not my own. How can I hand it over to you so easily?" Mr. Ghost sneered, said, "So it seems like Baiyao, miss, in your heart, is not that important. There is hope to save her, but you would rather give it up?" Ghostly coldly snorted, said, "Asking me to hand over the magical weapon to you, that is impossible." Mr. Ghost spread his hands, said, "Oh, then there is no other way." Ghostly was silent for a moment, suddenly said, "I have an idea, it is for you." He glanced at Mr. Ghost, frowned, hesitated for a moment, finally softened his voice, changed his words. "It is for Mr. You to tire yourself for a while. Not only can you comprehend the magical weapon, it can also resolve my worries. Not sure if Mr. is willing to listen?" Chapter 475. Mr. Ghost, said, "There is still such a way, please speak." Ghostly said, "Sorry to trouble, Mr. Just study this astrolabe in this cold stone room." Mr. Ghost was surprised, said, "What?" Ghostly indifferently said, "Of course I will accompany Mr., or if Mr. thinks that this place is not suitable to study, I am also willing to let Mr. choose any place, but I will definitely follow beside." Mr. Ghost looked at Ghostly, a strange glint flashed in his eyes. Ghostly's face was as usual, but his gaze was determined, clearly unwilling to give in. Mr. Ghost was silent for a moment, slowly said, "Let me consider this matter, we will talk about it later." Speaking, he turned back and glanced at Baiyao lying on the stone platform, suddenly said, "But Miss Baiyao's suffering these 10 years is really not small, you have to think carefully." Ghostly coldly snorted. A trace of pain flashed past his eyes, but his gaze was still sharp and sober, said, "No need for you to say more, I know better than you 100 times. Mr. Ghost nodded, turned and walked to open the stone door, left the stone room, watched that black figure disappear. The stone door closed with a rumble. Ghostly quietly turned and sat down beside the stone platform, stared at Baiyao's face. After a long time, he quietly said, "Baiyao, don't blame me, I really have no choice but to do this." After Mr. Ghost left the chamber, he stood outside the chamber for a moment. The tunnel outside was as usual empty, but for some reason, a strange atmosphere seemed to pervade the air. Mr. Ghost looked at the empty tunnel for a long while, turned and walked towards the other side. His footsteps were silent. In this strange silence, not a single sound was heard, just like a spirit. The deeper he walked, the darker the tunnel became, just that Mr. Ghost, dressed in black, seemed to be more suitable for this atmosphere. Looking from afar, he seemed to be slowly blending into that darkness. Just that he walked and walked, suddenly stopped, looked ahead. In front of him, there was a turn that led to another direction. There was no light at the corner. It seemed the darkest, and in that indistinct place, there seemed to be a figure quietly standing there. Mr. Ghost looked deeply at that black figure, slowly walked over. In the darkness, the figure moved and said in a low voice, "How is it?" Mr. Ghost silently shook his head, said, "He is not willing to give me that treasure." The shadow stiffened, and it seemed to be slightly unexpected. After that, for some reason, it actually became slightly angry. It suddenly took a step forward and said in a low voice, "Could it be that he doesn't care about Yao Er's life?" Mr. Ghost shook his head again, said, "It's not like you don't know his character. Miss Baiyao is the most important person in his heart, just that I think he does not trust me, so he is not willing to let me study the astrolabe." The shadow snorted and slowly walked out from the darkness. It was Ghost King. His face was cold and stern. He said, "Since he refused to hand over the treasure and our blood formation is not completed, it is not good to fall out with him in such a short time. What should we do?" Mr. Ghost indifferently said, "Ghostly still cares a lot about Miss Baiyao, so he raised a condition to me." Ghost King was surprised, said, "What condition?" Mr. Ghost sighed softly and said, "He can lend me the astrolabe treasure to study, but I have to be under his eyes at all times, watched by him." Ghost King immediately frowned, hesitated for a moment and said, "We are taking that treasure to remove the Qian Kuan lock that is binding the hidden dragon cauldron and the 4 divinities' blood formation. If he is not even a step away, how can we cast the spell?" Mr. Ghost bitterly laughed and said, "Then it is difficult here." Ghost King was silent, did not speak. Mr. Ghost thought for a while, said, "In my opinion, it is better to first retrieve the treasure and carefully study it. The ancient celestial weapon is full of wonders. Perhaps we can really find a way to remove the Qian Kuan lock. You must know that the astrolabe and the Chien Kuan lock on the hidden dragon cauldron resonated but were separated by a great distance. Ghost King silently nodded, slowly said, "Right now, this is the only way." Mr. Ghost turned and walked away. He indifferently said, "Then I will go and prepare first." "Wait." Ghost King's voice suddenly sounded behind him. Mr. Ghost paused for a moment, turned and looked at Ghost King, said, "Sect Head, is there anything else?" Ghost King's eyes suddenly turned sharp, stared at Mr. Ghost for a long while and then slowly said, "There is one more thing I want to ask you." Mr. Ghost said, "Sect Head, please speak." Ghost King's face was indifferent, but after the sharpness in his eyes, he seemed to be at a loss, said, "I ask you, that astrolabe ancient divine weapon, other than being able to remove the Chien Kuan lock, is it really possible to save Bai Yao?" Mr. Ghost was silent, after a long while slowly said, "I don't know, everything will only be clear after I carefully study that weapon." Ghost King's lips moved and then gently waved his hand, quietly said, "I understand, you can go." Mr. Ghost cupped his hands to Ghost King, turned and left. Ghost King stood alone in the passageway, did not move for a long time. The darkness in the passageway slowly spread out, gently merging Ghost King's lonely figure into the shadows. Not long after, other than a patch of darkness, his figure could no longer be seen. Ghostly quietly sat in the cold stone chamber, his back leaning against the stone platform where Bai Yao was lying. Xiao Hui was lying beside his legs, its head leaning on his thigh, snoring loudly. The stone chamber was quiet, so quiet that one could almost hear his own heartbeat. Ghost Li's face was indifferent, but a strange glint flashed in his eyes. Indistinctly there was a burning feeling. Right now it had already been a day and night since Mr. Ghost mentioned to study the astrolabe, but that black figure had not appeared again. Ghost Li's heart gradually felt uneasy, especially every time he saw Bai Yao's figure lying on the stone platform. The pain in his heart would become more and more intense. He even had the thought of risking everything for Bai Yao. But it was also at this moment, as if it was a reward for his sleepless nights. The stone door emitted a deep rumbling sound, slowly opened. Mr. Ghost's black figure appeared at the door, slowly walked in. The rumbling sound of the door opening was heard, deep and powerful, startled Xiao Hui, who was still sleeping. The monkey flipped over, crawled up from the ground, scratched its head. Its 3 eyes still looked drowsy. After a long while it recovered, bared its teeth at Mr. Ghost and made a ferocious face, then climbed up Ghost Li's shoulder, seemed to be very dissatisfied with Mr. Ghost, who disturbed its sleep. But the monkey's dissatisfaction, Ghost Li clearly did not show the same expression, even secretly heaved a sigh of relief, faintly smiled. He looked at Mr. Ghost, simply said, "How is it?" Mr. Ghost was naturally not someone who liked to nag, directly and clearly replied, "Just do as you said before." Ghostly nodded. Mr. Ghost was heard looking around, suddenly said, "But," Ghostly was surprised, said, "But what?" Mr. Ghost said, "But I'm afraid we have to change to another place." Ghostly frowned, said, "Why is that?" Mr. Ghost indifferently said, "This ice stone room is after all Miss Bai Yao's resting place. That astrolabe treasure had changed the few times it was activated. If we continue to meditate here, wouldn't it be detrimental to Miss Bai Yao?" Ghostly pondered for a moment, slowly nodded, said, "That's right, if that's the case, we really should change to another place." He glanced at Mr. Ghost, said, "Could it be that Mr. Ghost already knows where the suitable place is?" Mr. Ghost smiled, said, "Since I have already made up my mind before coming here, naturally I have thought of everything. Come with me." Speaking, he turned and walked out of the stone room. Ghostly looked back at Bai Yao, who was lying on the stone platform, softly said, "Bai Yao, rest well, I will definitely think of a way to save you." Bai Yao quietly laid there, an indistinct smile in her tranquility. Ghostly quietly watched her for a long while, then turned, took a deep breath, and strode out. The stone door slowly closed behind him. Ghostly looked at that black figure, said, "Will Mr. please lead the way?" Mr. Ghost quietly laughed. That voice was eerie. Ghostly heard it and couldn't help but frowned. But usually when he heard Mr. Ghost talking, it seemed to be the same tone, just that for some reason, today it sounded exceptionally piercing to the ear. Mr. Ghost gently gestured to Ghostly, turned and walked deeper into the mountain. Ghostly followed behind him. Xiao Hui crouched on Ghostly's shoulder, seemed to have completely lost its sleepiness, looking around, especially at the increasingly thick and deep cracks on both sides of the tunnel. Both of them slowly walked forward in the dark tunnel. There was not a single figure nearby, only footsteps reverberated in the illusory space. After walking for a while, Ghostly suddenly spoke. "Mister, have you seen the cracks around here?" Mr. Ghost's black figure suddenly paused, but he did not stop and did not turn to look. He maintained his unhurried pace, at the same time quietly said, "These things are so obvious, of course I have seen them. I wonder why Vice Sect heads suddenly ask about this?" Ghostly's footsteps did not change. If he could follow Mr. Ghost slowly forward, just that he looked at the cracks on the walls, a strange glint flashed in his eyes, and then slowly returned to Mr. Ghost's back, faintly said, "I have been in Ghost King's sect for 10 years, never have such strange things happened. Mister's time in Ghost King's sect is much longer than mine. Your knowledge is profound, maybe you can answer my doubts?" Mr. Ghost suddenly stopped. His black figure seemed to freeze. Ghostly also stopped at the same time, quietly watched him. The dark tunnel was empty, as if freedom of darkness was quietly spreading out, slowly gathered beside Mr. Ghost. Mr. Ghost was silent for a long time, then slowly turned around, looked at Ghostly. Ghostly stood behind him, without the slightest intention of avoiding him, looked straight into his eyes. Mr. Ghost's face was veiled. His expression could not be seen, but his eyes were extremely bright, incongruous with the indistinctly gathered darkness. His deep voice, calm tone, quietly said, "May I ask, Vice Sect Head, why did you not ask the countless people in Ghost King Sect, and instead asked me?" Chapter 476. Ghostly stared at his eyes, indifferently said, "Naturally it is because I know Mr. is the #1 in Ghost King Sect in terms of knowledge and experience, so I sincerely seek your advice." Mr. Ghost was silent for a moment, looked at Ghostly but saw his indifferent face, without any expression, could not tell what exactly he was thinking. After a long time, unhurriedly said, "These cracks are because of several earthquakes within 100 miles radius of majestic Fox Mountain, causing the mountain to shake, the rock walls to crack." Ghostly looked deeply at Mr. Ghost. An indistinct glint in his eyes said, "So it is because of this?" Mr. Ghost suddenly asked, "If not, what does Vice Sect Head Sir think it is?" Ghostly did not speak. The tunnel where they were still conversing suddenly quietened down, carrying a trace of cold air. Mr. Ghost suddenly had that illusion. Around Ghostly, unknowingly, some darkness quietly gathered, surrounding that young man. After a moment, Ghostly indifferently said, "I am only sincerely seeking advice, no other intentions. Mr. said this is the reason. Naturally it is." Mr. Ghost looked deeply at Ghostly, slowly turned and continued to walk forward. Ghostly's footsteps were heard again behind him. On the stone walls of the passageway beside the two of them, the crisscrossing, ferocious and abrupt cracks seemed to be looking at the two of them with a sinister smile, roaring silently. Both of them slowly walked deeper into the tunnel, the darkness behind them, quietly encircled, swallowing the last trace of light. Not knowing how long they had walked in the tunnel, Ghostly, who was behind Mr. Ghost, observed the surroundings, slowly frowned. Finally, when Mr. Ghost stopped, stood at an extremely secluded stone room entrance. Clearly he had chosen this place, but Ghostly's brows locked even tighter. "Wait!" Just when Mr. Ghost stretched out his hand to open the door, Ghostly suddenly spoke. "Isn't this Ghost King Sect Head's stone room?" Mr. Ghost slowly turned around, quietly said, "That's right, this is the place." Ghostly frowned, said, "You want to comprehend the astrolabe here?" Mr. Ghost nodded, said, "That's right." Ghostly coldly glanced at him, said, "There are thousands of stone chambers in the Ghost King Sect caves. Why did you choose this one?" Mr. Ghost glanced at Ghostly, a glint flashed past his eyes, said, Why, do you feel it is inappropriate to choose Ghost King Sect Head's residence? Ghostly was silent. If he really had to say what was wrong with Ghost King's stone chamber, he really could not tell, but these few days in order to pursue that mysterious force, he had already secretly searched every corner of Ghost King Sect caves, only the place where Ghost King resided. He still had some scruples and did not search carefully. Staring at that stone door, after a moment of silence, Ghostly quietly said, I don't have anything, but this place is after all Sect Head's residence. Is it better to inform him? Mr. Ghost laughed quietly, said, Don't worry, I have already told Sect Head. After knowing it is to save Miss Biao, Sect Head naturally agreed immediately. As for why I chose this place, a strange light flashed in his eyes as he quietly said, It's just because this place is quiet. Ghostly glanced at Mr. Ghost, suddenly sneered and said, Quiet only? Mr. Ghost seemed to not understand the other meaning in Ghostly's words, indifferently said, That's all. Ghostly shut his mouth and did not speak any more. Mr. Ghost nodded, stretched his hand to open the stone door. In the deep and familiar rumble, the stone door slowly moved to the side, revealing the simple furnished room inside. Ghostly followed Mr. Ghost in and then glanced around. The surrounding furnishings were the picture albums hanging on the walls, all the same as what he had seen before. But Ghostly frowned, discovered that even he could not recall when was the last time he came to Ghost King's residence to visit him. Ghost King was not in the house. Mr. Ghost turned around, faced Ghostly's questioning gaze, faintly said, Ghost King Sect Head had instructed beforehand, ordered us to stay here and comprehend. He is busy with important matters and will not disturb us these few days. Ghostly silently nodded, suddenly thought of something, said, Oh right, Bai Yao there. Mr. Ghost waved his hand, signaled Ghostly to be at ease, said, Don't worry, Sect Head has already said that during this period of our study, he will take care of Bai Yao, miss. You don't believe others, but you won't even believe Bai Yao, miss, father, right? Ghostly was silent for a moment, nodded and said, Then I am also at ease. Mr. Ghost, if there is nothing else, shall we start now? Mr. Ghost took 2 praying mats from the side, threw one to Ghostly, himself sat on the other, said, All right. Ghostly sat on the other praying mat, took out the astrolabe magical weapon from his bosom, untied the black cloth, stared at the astrolabe for a moment and then slowly passed it to Mr. Ghost. Xiao Hui, who was crouching on Ghostly's shoulder, its eyes followed the astrolabe. Its expression suddenly turned strange. Mr. Ghost took the astrolabe. It was warm to the touch. Faint white gentle light emitted from the astrolabe, gently flowing in front of him, reflected in his eyes. Mr. Ghost quietly watched the astrolabe. His eyes looked at it inch by inch, as if to see through this treasure. The stone chamber fell into silence. It was as if even the sound of breathing had disappeared. On the other side of the majestic Fox Mountain Ghost King Sect Cave, after Ghostly left with Mr. Ghost, it sank into the usual quiet cold stone chamber. The white cold air, carrying some loneliness, quietly drifted in the stone chamber. In the empty stone room, the green figure was still lying there quietly, motionless. There was a peaceful expression on her face, and a faint smile hung on the corner of her mouth. It was as if everything was the same as it was 10 years ago, and time had not left the slightest trace on her face. She was still so beautiful, but in her heart, had there ever been a faint sorrow, or a faint sense of regret? The white cold air like smoke drifted, looked gradually hazy, like a shadow that had been in a dream for too long, appearing and disappearing in the dream. Ding! Suddenly, an extremely clear sound, thin but clear, rang out in the cold stone chamber. Invisible sound waves swept past, like a breeze. The faint mist, like cold mist drifting in the stone chamber, suddenly trembled slightly. Ding! Another light sound, this time it was even clearer. That sound came from Bai Yao's white hands, the small Hehuan bell. In the stone room, the light smoke that was originally drifting seemed to have started to drift a little faster, and the melodious echoes of the bells bounced off the stone walls, one after the other, actually unending, interweaving into a faint reverberating music, a bit of joy, a bit of sorrow, a bit of passion, and a bit of sigh. Ding! That third bell sound suddenly rose. Instantly the white smoke in the stone chamber flowed backward, like the waves in the sea of clouds rolling up and down. A clear whistle split the stone, pierced the clouds, straight up, faint golden light, faintly shone out from Bai Yao's hands. In the stone chamber there was a faint sound of wind and thunder, but after a moment it seemed to be weak, unable to continue. This clear sharp sound slowly subsided, and the faint golden light between Bai Yao's fingers also gradually dimmed down. The ringing of the bell slowly disappeared in the cold stone room. The white smoke returned to normal, gently drifting, as if nothing had happened, not leaving any trace. Silence returned to the stone chamber. After a long time, the stone door of the cold stone chamber suddenly emitted a deep roar, slowly opened. Ghost King's figure appeared at the door, slowly walked in. He slowly walked to the side of the cold stone platform, looked at his daughter, after a while, quietly said, "Yaoer, it is father who is here to see you." Bai Yao's expression did not have the slightest change, like every moment in these 10 years. Ghost King was clearly used to such an outcome. His gaze towards his daughter was full of love, there was no longer any fierceness. He gently sat down at the side of the stone platform, raised his head, looked at the white smoke floating in the air in the stone chamber. "Yaoer, 10 years, unknowingly, you have already slept like this for 10 years. He suddenly laughed, with some bitterness at the corner of his mouth, quietly said, "If you wake up now, will you not recognize father?" He paused for a moment, then gently shook his head and laughed bitterly, as if he was laughing at himself. He said to himself, "How could that be? Naturally, you would recognize me. But I'm sure you would say, 'Father, why do you have so many white hairs?'" Ghost King's hand gently stroked his smooth hair, and his expression also seemed to be at a loss. Between his fingers, the white hairs were all over. He sank into silence, as if recalling something, not knowing if he was lamenting his growing old, or recalling the past of father and daughter. After a long time, his voice was heard softly saying, "Yaoer, don't worry, as long as father is alive, I will definitely save you. Ghostly and Mr. Ghost have already gone to study that magical weapon. Hopefully heaven will open its eyes and be able to comprehend a way to save you." Speaking till here, Ghost King stopped. His expression gradually turned cold. After a moment, he quietly continued, "But if heaven really does not open its eyes, you also don't have to be afraid. As long as that astrolabe can unlock the Qian Kuan lock, the 4 divinities' blood formation will be perfect, then father will be omnipotent, dominating the world will not be a problem, coming back to save you will definitely be as easy as turning one's palm." The white smoke suddenly abruptly retreated 1 qi. In that instant, Ghost King seemed to be agitated. A formless energy suddenly burst out from his body, shot out. After a long while, the white smoke slowly floated back, gathered in the middle of the stone chamber. "Don't be afraid, don't worry." Ghost King's eyes were still staring at the white smoke in the air, but his words were still so gentle. "Father will definitely save you. Father's stone chamber is the closest place to the 4 divinities' blood formation in the entire majestic Fox Mountain Cave. Now what we have to do is to slowly wait." Chapter 477. 3 days had passed. Ghostly, who was waiting in Ghost King's stone chamber, his expression had already turned from the initial calm indifference to uneasiness and then to anxiety, and now his face was filled with irritation and impatience. To him, even though he had thought that this astrolabe was after all not an ordinary treasure, to comprehend its mystery required a long period of mental preparation, but he had never thought that it would take as long as 3 days, and most importantly, although these 3 days had passed, Mr. Ghost still did not seem to have any progress. According to his original thoughts, when Mr. Ghost first came into contact with the astrolabe, it triggered a change in the astrolabe. He should have some understanding of this treasure. After a few days of study, it would not be difficult to understand the mystery. Who knew that in these 3 days, He stayed beside Mr. Ghost, only saw Mr. Ghost turning this ancient celestial weapon over and over, not to mention memorizing it. Ghostly even felt that Mr. Ghost should have memorized all the ancient characters on the small jade pieces that kept sliding in the middle of the astrolabe. However, Mr. Ghost was clearly in some kind of predicament, or it could be said, in comprehending this treasure, Mr. Ghost had met with an extremely difficult problem. After a few days, there was no progress at all. Ghost King's stone chamber, compared to the other stone chambers in the majestic Fox Mountain Cave, was naturally much more spacious and was divided into two parts. The larger one on the outside was where Ghostly and Mr. Ghost studied the astrolabe. The smaller one on the inside was naturally Ghost King's bedroom. Although Ghost King was not around, but in these 3 days, Ghostly and Mr. Ghost did not step into the room with their skills, not to mention 3 days and 3 nights. Even if they did not sleep for 10 days and 10 nights, they could still hold on. Just that the most unbearable part was still the word waiting. For these 3 days, Ghostly did not leave this stone chamber. Xiao Hui also stayed here, but the monkey was restless, not moving for 3 days. Xiao Hui was suffocated. Right now Ghostly and Mr. Ghost were still staring at that astrolabe treasure. In these 3 days, they could not be bothered with Xiao Hui. Xiao Hui scurried to and fro in this stone chamber. After these 3 days, it had long familiarized itself with every corner. Right now it jumped onto Ghost King's big table. If it was any other day, no one in Ghost King's sect would dare to do so, but right now, the sky was high and the Emperor was far away. No one bothered about it. Xiao Hui was bored to death, lying down on the large study table for a while, and then getting up again, dancing with joy for a while, and then lying down on all fours. In the end, it was too bored to be alone, and could only awkwardly sit up again, scratching its head, making low zzz sounds, looking around, trying to find some fun. Although this stone chamber was spacious, but it was not exaggeratedly big, so naturally, its eyes saw the inner room. Xiao Hui scratched its head, turned and looked at Ghostly. Ghostly's face was dark. Some viciousness surfaced on his face. Evidently he was in a bad mood, and Mr. Ghost was concentrating on that astrolabe in his hand, which was emitting faint white gentle light, occasionally looked up, glanced at Ghostly, and then looked away again. Both of them were clearly focused on the astrolabe. Even if they had a little extra vigilance, they would at most look at each other. No one paid any attention to the monkey. Xiao Hui shrugged its shoulders, curled its lips, tsk, grumbled twice, its tail wagged twice, turned its body, looked at the inner room for a while, and then jumped down from the table, slowly walked over. The furnishings in Ghost King's residence were not luxurious. Instead, it was very simple, showing that the owner of this place did not care about worldly luxuries. The outer room was like that, the inner room was also like that. A wooden bed, a round table, 3 round stools, 4 paintings hung on the surrounding stone walls. One was a freehand brushwork of mountains and rivers, pale ink with white margins, had an otherworldly feeling. The second was flowers and birds welcoming spring, birds flying on the flowers, full of spring. The third painting was a crouching tiger among the trees. The artistic conception was different from the previous 2. The tiger's aura was awe-inspiring. Its power was biting cold, impressively had the intention of looking down on the world. Xiao Hui naturally did not understand the artistic conception of paintings. What landscape, flowers and birds in the monkey's eyes, it was no different from a white cloth. But the third crouching tiger painting, the tiger's aura was awe-inspiring. It was rather realistic. Xiao Hui was stunned for a moment, but then reacted, bared its teeth and made a face at the tiger on the wall, a sound of spitting. These 3 paintings were hung side by side on the inner room's stone wall, reflecting each other. Although the artistic conception of the paintings was very different, but looking at it, there was an indistinct harmony, forming its own pattern. And opposite to these 3 paintings, on the other side of the stone wall, there was only one painting. The painting was not of mountains and rivers, not of flowers and birds, but of a beautiful lady. This painting was a meticulous brushwork, extremely detailed. That beautiful lady, from the rings and earrings, were all extremely realistic. not to mention the dignified and beautiful countenance, made people who looked at her involuntarily fall in love. It could be said to be a rare painting treasure in the world. Just that in the human's eyes, the treasures in the painting, in the monkey's 3 eyes, naturally it would be greatly discounted. Xiao Hui looked at it without any expression of astonishment. After a few glances, it turned back to look at that tiger portrait. He didn't know what a good painting looked like in the eyes of a monkey. Perhaps it should be a painting of a few monkeys? What exactly the monkey liked to draw, people naturally had no way of knowing, but right now Xiao Hui was obviously most concerned about that painting of the crouching tiger in the jungle. Its 3 eyes blinked and jumped to the bottom of the painting, lifting its head to look at the painting. That tiger in the painting was awe-inspiring. Its skills were also not to be underestimated. The strokes were vigorous. There seemed to be a ferocious tiger breaking out of the painting, raising its head to the sky and letting out a long roar that could intimidate thousands of beasts. Xiao Hui watched for a long time, suddenly turned and looked outside. Ghostly and Mr. Ghost's figures were already blocked by the stone wall, and after such a long time, there was still no movement outside. Evidently no one had noticed Xiao Hui's movements. The monkey turned back, scratched its head. The next moment, as if it had suddenly made up its mind, leapt up abruptly, leapt high up from the ground. These 3 paintings were originally hung on the stone walls. Other than the walls, there were no tables or chairs that could be climbed. Normally ordinary monkeys and beasts would not be able to reach them. Just that Xiao Hui was not an ordinary monkey. With this leap, it actually reached the top of the painting. Its claws lifted up and easily took down the painting. Just that the painting was rather long. Following Xiao Hui's fall, it could not stop itself and also made a sound, dropped onto the ground. Although the sound was not loud, but what kind of people were the 2 people outside? Immediately it alarmed them. After a moment of silence, Ghost Li's voice was heard. With a puzzled tone he called out, "Xiao Hui." Following a strange sound of dragging the ground, under Ghost Li and Mr. Ghost's gazes, the monkey ran out from Ghost King's stone chamber. At the same time its hand was holding a painting. The other half of the paper was scattered, dragged on the ground, dragged to Ghost Li. Ghost Li and Mr. Ghost were stunned for a moment. Xiao Hui clutched the painting tightly in its hand, ran to Ghost Li. Zzz, incessantly called out. Ghost Li frowned, stretched out his hand to take the painting over, unfolded it to take a look. It was an exquisitely drawn picture of a crouching tiger in the jungle. He assessed it from top to bottom, looked at Xiao Hui, said, "What are you doing with this painting?" Xiao Hui jumped up, danced with joy, its face full of excitement. Both hands waved, either pointing at the tiger in the painting, or drawing a strange picture in the air, and then pointing to the north, extremely busy. Mr. Ghost, who was beside, was dazzled, although he was extremely knowledgeable but towards this 3-eyed monkey's monkey language. He did not understand anything. Filled with questions, he could only turn and look at Ghost Li, who knew that Ghost Li's expression was also stunned. Watching Xiao Hui's movements and the incessant cries, Ghost Li glanced at the painting again, hesitated for a moment, said, "You don't tell me you feel that the thing in this painting is very similar to De Huang, and so want to bring this painting away and give it to De Huang in the future?" Xiao Hui immediately nodded repeatedly. Although Ghost Li was not in a good mood, but he still could not help but laugh. The tiger in the painting was indeed lifelike, but its might was imposing. Even if it was lying in the bushes, it was still awe-inspiring. How could it be compared to that big bamboo valley, although its fur was bright but extremely lazy, gluttonous and sleepy big dog? Furthermore, no matter how Ghost Li looked, he really could not tell which part of this tiger was similar to De Huang. Seemed like the monkey's vision was really different from humans. But after the laughter, Ghost Li also thought of De Huang 1,000 miles away, and that mountain peak that brought warmth in his memories. After a moment of silence, a faint smile appeared on his lips. His expression also turned much gentler, quietly said, "This painting belongs to Ghost King's sect leader. It is not good to take it away now, but don't worry, I will ask him for it for you later." Speaking, he gently rolled up the painting and placed it aside. Mr. Ghost could not help but ask, Who is De Huang? Ghostly paused and then faintly glanced at Mr. Ghost, said, A dog. Mr. Ghost paused, could not speak for a moment and then coughed once, did not speak and turned his eyes back to the astrolabe. Ghostly stroked Xiao Hui's head, quietly instructed it. It was nothing other than telling Xiao Hui not to run around, and then turned his attention back to the astrolabe. After all, in his heart, understanding the astrolabe was the most important thing right now. Xiao Hui sat beside the two of them for a while, and very quickly became bored again. Actually, it was not the monkey's fault. Anyone who stayed beside the two of them for 3 days and 3 nights only to see them doing the same thing would also be annoyed, not to mention the monkey who was naturally active. At this moment, Mr. Ghost seemed to have discovered something, suddenly pointed to those small moving pieces of jade in the middle of the plate and said, I think the crux of this treasure is on these continuously sliding pieces of jade. Ghostly slowly nodded, clearly agreed with this view, but then his brows slightly frowned, said, But we have watched for 3 days and still could not figure out why these pieces of jade can move on their own, not sure what is Mr.'s opinion. Mr. Ghost pondered for a moment, said, Do you feel the trajectory of these pieces of jade is similar to the movement of the stars in the firmament? Ghostly's body shook and then stared intently at the astrolabe, after a long while clapped his hands and said, It indeed makes some sense. Mr. Ghost said, Actually, I also do not have much confidence, but it feels so, just that even though these pieces of jade are moving like the stars in the firmament, but there are still many undeciphered mysteries. I think, if we want to understand this treasure, the crux is on the ancient characters on these pieces of jade. Ghostly slowly nodded. Both of them continued to converse, asking and answering each other. Very soon they were again immersed in this astrolabe treasure. Xiao Hui sat for a long while, and then turned to leave. In the stone chamber, Ghostly and Mr. Ghost's soft whispers were heard. Xiao Hui looked around for a moment, in its boredom, quietly walked into the inner chamber again. There were some marks on the stone wall where the painting had just been pulled off. There was a slight difference in color from the surrounding stone walls. It seemed that this painting had been hanging there for some time. Just that in this inner chamber, other than the 4 paintings, there was only the wooden bed, table and chairs. There was nothing else interesting. Xiao Hui touched here and there. Not long after, it became bored again. Just when it was really bored to the extreme, suddenly the monkey's 3 eyes suddenly lit up, as if it had discovered something, and then with a leap, its entire body suddenly jumped onto Ghost King's wooden bed. Not caring if it dirted the bedding, it actually started to roll and toss about on it. Although the furnishings in the stone chamber were simple, but it was very clean. Most likely Ghost King was also a person who liked cleanliness. If he came back and saw this scene, would he be seething with anger? But right now Xiao Hui did not care so much. Anyway, there was no one to care about it. It was minding its own business on the bed, jumping and jumping. Suddenly it seemed to have bumped into something at a corner of the bed. The entire bed suddenly vibrated. Following which, on the stone wall that the bed was leaning against, a large crack quietly split open and then slowly and soundlessly retreated to both sides, revealing a large hole that allowed one person to enter and exit. Xiao Hui had already felt something the moment the bed shook and jumped down, crouched on the ground and watched in bewilderment, until it saw a secret door quietly revealed on the stone wall. The monkey slowly stood up, glanced into the secret door, but it was pitch black inside. Nothing could be seen, but there were no ferocious monsters running out. And that mysterious black hole, right now it seemed to have some enticement to the bored monkey, seemed to be gently waving to it. Xiao Hui scratched its head, turned and glanced behind. In the stone chamber outside, Ghostly and Mr. Ghost were again in silence. Seemed like it was going to be another long period of meditation. The monkey turned around, suddenly grinned, made a funny face and then lightly leapt up into that black hole. In a short while, its figure disappeared into the darkness. A faint gust of wind gently blew out from that mysterious black hole on the stone wall. It carried with it a faint smell of blood. Once it entered the secret door, Xiao Hui's third eye in the middle of its forehead flashed with a faint golden light, emitting a strange light, under this faint golden light, the dark cave could be vaguely seen clearly. The tunnel that could only accommodate a person's height, it was not very smooth for a person to walk on, but to a monkey, it was more than enough. Xiao Hui, with a sense of adventure and excitement, walked for a while in this tunnel, and then felt the ground under its feet suddenly sank. This tunnel turned downward. The stone walls on both sides of the tunnel, as it went deeper, it gradually became damp. At some places, there were even water droplets gently dripping down in the darkness. In the extremely quiet passageway, only the monkey's figure was slowly moving forward. In the darkness ahead, there would occasionally be a light breeze that carried a strange and faint smell of blood. Chapter 478. This downhill path was not steep but rather long. Xiao Hui walked for a long time. It should be deep into the underground of majestic Fox Mountain. It was also at this moment that Xiao Hui suddenly stopped in his tracks. Somewhere in the distance, a faint red light suddenly lit up. The monkey stood in the passageway for a while, seemingly hesitant. After a while, it turned back to look at the path it had come from and scratched its head, as if hesitating whether it should go back and inform its master. However, the red light in front of it seemed to be tempting it, flickering gently. Finally, after the monkey squeaked twice, it carefully moved forward. As it neared that red light, the faint smell of blood in the path slowly became stronger. Xiao Hui's expression also became nervous, stretched out its nose to sniff the air, its eyes bewildered. But in the end, the red light was right before it, it still moved forward. Finally, before the red light, it was actually another entrance of this tunnel. Xiao Hui peeked out from here and with a leap jumped out. The next moment, the monkey was already on a large road that was several times wider than the previous tunnel. Other than the tunnel that Xiao Hui came in from, there was another tunnel that was connected to it, just beside the tunnel that Xiao Hui jumped down from, but it was equally dark and gloomy, not knowing where it led to. And on the other side of the main path, it was completely different from the darkness in the tunnel. It was very bright, especially the red light flashing incessantly at the end of the main path. It seemed like what Xiao Hui saw from afar in the tunnel was this scene. There was still no one around, even at the end of the bright red light. There were only flashes of light and no strange sounds. Xiao Hui sniffed the air. The smell of blood was so strong that it would not dissipate. And after a moment, Xiao Hui's eyes suddenly froze, landed on the entrance that it had just entered from, the original green stone wall, without knowing when, had turned dark red, and the water slowly dripping from the damp places on the wall, in the light, looked extremely red, like fresh blood. One drop, slowly dripping down. The golden eye on Xiao Hui's forehead gradually brightened. After staring at that blood bead for a long while, it slowly turned around, looked at that flickering red light in the distance. After a long while, the monkey once again strided forward, walked towards that direction. The red glow flickered strangely, as if it had a mind of its own. It gently breathed out and gradually expanded, engulfing the figure of the monkey that was slowly walking over. It was already late at night, although one could not clearly feel the change of day and night in the majestic Fox Mountain cave, but outside the cave, the night sky was dotted with stars, starlight twinkling, like countless days of the past spilled over. Also in the dark and barren majestic Fox Mountain, illuminated some places. Under the starlight, suddenly a white figure floated over from afar, light and graceful, looked weightless, like a leaf in the wind, blown over by the night wind, slowly landed on the majestic Fox Mountain peak. Borrowing the faint starlight, this white graceful figure turned over, delicate eyebrows and watery eyes, fair skin, a faint seductive charm that made one's heart palpitate, lingering between her eyebrows. It was the nine-tailed celestial fox Xiao Bai. Right now, Xiao Bai's eyebrows were slightly frowning, her face also had a rare solemn expression. She stood on the majestic Fox Mountain peak. The night wind blew gently, the surroundings were barren, not a single tree could block the wind. Her robe fluttered, revealing her voluptuous and alluring figure. Xiao Bai slowly looked around, the majestic Fox Mountain now, everywhere were rocks and gravel, not to mention trees. There was not even a single weed. Looking at this desolate scenery, who would believe that just a few decades ago, this was still a beautiful place? Others did not know, but Xiaobai knew, because the area around majestic Fox Mountain was where the Fox Demon clan ancestors originated and lived. She grew up here. The mountains and rivers, every grass and tree, to her, were all different from other places. However, all of that had mysteriously disappeared at some point in time. All that was left was the desolation in front of him. Xiaobai slowly crouched down, stretched out her fair hand, gently grabbed a handful of soil. No, it should be sand. The majestic Fox Mountain ground was cracked, leaving only gravel. The hard gravel spread out in her delicate hand. Xiaobai carefully looked at the gravel in her hand. A strange glint flashed in her eyes, as if trying to see something from this small gravel. After a while, she slowly closed her palm, clenched it into a fist, and gently loosened it. The sand quietly slid down from between her fingers, but in the air it was blown away by the night wind from afar, reflecting a faint light under the starlight, disappearing into the dark distance under the curtain of night. The gravel here was no different from other places. Xiaobai slowly stood up, looked up at the starry sky. The starlight shone on her, like a gentle hand gently caressing her, comforting her. She frowned slightly, pondered for a long time. Suddenly, her eyes widened as if she had thought of something. However, she didn't make any big movements. Instead, she strangely lifted her leg and stomped heavily on the ground like a little girl in the secular world when she was angry and acted like a spoiled child. Pooh! A deep muffled sound sounded in the night wind, drifted with the wind. A wave of dust rose and then gently settled down in the wind. The next moment, suddenly from the ground below Xiaobai's feet, a strange sound was heard, continuous and uninterrupted, rang for almost half a cup of tea's time and then gradually calmed down. Xiaobai's lips curled, her white body like duckweed, like being lifted up by the wind, extremely graceful, but her pair of watery eyes only stared at the ground below her feet. The next moment, her body in the air, suddenly spread out her sleeves, brushed towards the ground. The brushing force was not small, even a few sharp whistling sounds were heard in the night sky. When the sleeves brushed past the ground, immediately sand and stones flew, dust flew. Whitey, who was in midair, did not stop. It waved its sleeves continuously. After waving 7 times, the smoke and dust on the ground had already formed a small gray tornado. It was filled with gravel and sand. It rotated rapidly and swept up under the starry night sky. Xiaobai lightly whistled, her body abruptly pulled up by more than 10 feet. Under the starlight, her white figure floated like a fairy, dazzling and with another kind of seductive beauty. As her figure rose, the tornado formed by the sand was suddenly pulled up by an invisible force, but it suddenly blew in the opposite direction of Xiaobai. The wind's speed was so fast that in a short while, the wind pillar mixed with countless sand had completely fallen into the distance. Rumbling sounds continuously came from the darkness, presumably the sound of those stones smashing on the ground. And under Xiaobai's feet, where the original majestic Fox Mountain peak was, a 6 chi wide, 10 feet deep large hole, Xiaobai's movements were able to dig such a large hole in the hard as iron mountain peak. This skill was already shocking, but with her 1,000 years of cultivation as a 9-tailed celestial fox, it was not unexpected. However, Little White clearly did not come to the top of the mountain to dig a hole in the middle of the night out of boredom. She slowly descended from midair, and her eyes never left the hole. Her white figure directly floated into the deep hole. Once in the deep hole, Xiaobai's descending speed immediately became extremely slow, as if there was something invisible supporting her body under her feet, and she also stared intently at the walls of the huge hole, using the faint starlight in the sky, focused. Fair slender hands, pressed on the rough stone wall, formed a sharp contrast, a strange feeling, but Xiaobai did not seem to notice these. She only followed her own hands, followed her body as she slowly descended, carefully looked at the walls of the hole. Reflected in her eyes was a greenish-gray stone wall, rough and hard, cold to touch. Then, as Xiao Bai's body slowly descended, her eyes also slowly descended 1 qi. It was still greenish-gray stone, no change at all, the same as the mountains above and in this world. She continued to descend, her fair hands on the rock wall, gently descended 2 qi deep. It was still the same greenish-gray hard rock. 3 qi, 4 qi, 5 qi, there was no change, it was still that hard rock. The cold feeling seemed to have been passed down for thousands of years, now suddenly seeing the light of day, from the rough surface of the rock wall, coldly exuded. Xiao Bai's face did not have any expression, her body still gently descending. The next moment, suddenly, her eyes lit up, her body shook in the air, stopped. On the rock wall 6 feet above the ground, next to her white palm, finally, the first abnormality appeared on the hard rock. A faint red mark, like a tiny blood vessel, appeared on the rock. Xiao Bai stared intently at the tiny red mark for a long time. Suddenly her lips curled into a sneer, and then her body slowly descended, her eyes still staring intently at the rock wall. As expected, as her figure gradually descended, more abnormalities appeared in front of her. The greenish-gray rock that should have been harder the further down she went, now the deeper the cracks on the rock wall slowly increased, and the color of the rock also gradually deepened, slowly turning red. The red marks increased, the color also became darker and darker. After reaching 10 feet deep, Xiao Bai slowly turned and looked. In front of her was already a dark red rock wall. Thick cracks could be seen everywhere, and around her, the rock wall was no longer cold, instead it gave off a thick smell of blood. That ghastly blood red, that kind of horror that was about to devour people. Xiao Bai's eyes revealed an unconcealable look of disgust. With a cold snort, her figure moved and her white figure soared into the sky. She flew out of the cave and landed on the ground beside the deep pit. The starlight in the night shone down and once again landed on her white figure. Like water, it washed away the nightmarish scene from before. Xiao Bai's face was indifferent, took a deep breath, faced the night breeze from afar, looked up at the sky. The next moment, she suddenly laughed coldly, quietly muttered to herself, "For thousands of years, there are always some people who do not know the immensity of heaven and earth, want to do some stupid things. What will happen to them? Let us see together." He 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 he. The ice-cold laughter gently drifted in the night wind, drifting away with the wind, not knowing which corner of the world it drifted to. And under the curtain of the night, under the starlight, that beautiful white figure still stood at the peak of the mountains, facing the wind, with a bit of breathtaking beauty, standing alone and lonely. This late night, it seemed like there were also many people who could not sleep, as if something was lingering in their hearts, and there was an inexplicable feeling. People always had some indescribable feeling. In the majestic Fox Mountain cave, Ghostly and Mr. Ghost were still concentrating on the astrolabe. They had already reached an extremely crucial moment. With Mr. Ghost's profound knowledge, he had already managed to deduce a few of the ancient characters on the astrolabe, although he had yet to understand the astrolabe's mysteries, but clearly it was already much better than before. And in Ghostly's nervousness, suddenly he sensed something. His eyes left the astrolabe for a moment, looked around, saw that it was empty. Xiao Hui had gone somewhere to play or perhaps found a place to sleep. A flash from the corner of his eyes, landed on the scroll beside him, was silent for a moment, seemed to recall something. A faint smile revealed on his lips. Just that this smile, although warm, but disappeared very quickly. He gently shook his head, as if throwing away something that he should not be thinking about right now, and then went back into that profound astrolabe. In another place in the belly of majestic Fox Mountain, in a quiet cold stone room, smoke gently drifted. Bai Yu was still sleeping quietly, and beside her, Ghost King quietly sat upright. Gray hair hung down from his head, reminding him that he was already old, and the person sleeping beside him made his heart ache even more. In such a late night, like the countless nights in these 10 years, he did not feel sleepy. He quietly waited for dawn, waited for tomorrow. Maybe, tomorrow, everything would really change. His hand, unconsciously clenched into a fist. Far away, 1,000 miles away, the same lonely and quiet night. High up in Ching Yun Hill's small bamboo valley, the night wind howled, the bamboo swayed. Lu Sweki slowly sat up from the bed. This night, for some reason she could not sleep. Tossing and turning, for whom? She gently got off the bed, did not wear shoes, just walked barefoot on the ground. A chill came from the soles of her feet. The ground was as cool as water. She walked to the window, and stretched out her hand to push it open. The starlight that filled the sky flowed like ripples and instantly spilled in, causing her beautiful face to shine even more brilliantly. Lu Sweki quietly gazed at the stars in the horizon, motionless. In such a late night, the person far away, was he also under the starry sky? That faint starlight, did it also spilled on him? She quietly gazed at the starry sky, did not move again, like she was also anticipating something. The starlight was faint but seemed eternal and unchanging, seeing through the vicissitudes of the world, seeing through gratitude and grudges, love and hatred. Maybe tomorrow will be better. In her heart, she quietly thought like this. Tomorrow, what would it be like? Nobody knew. Chapter 479. The red light flickered incessantly, illuminating the huge space as if it was daytime. The surroundings were filled with the pungent smell of blood. A wide platform path extended out from the cave entrance, all the way to the middle of the huge cave. Xiao Hui carefully walked out from the tunnel, jumped onto the platform. Its weak little body in this huge cave seemed extremely tiny. Obviously, this was a place that was very different from the other places. Even the active and curious monkey, right now, also felt something and did not immediately run forward, instead stood where it was, its 3 eyes looking around. As far as the eye could see, there was a red hue everywhere. Red shadows flashed in midair, and occasionally, there would be a commotion in the silence, but it was a strange red wind that swept past. And under the monkey's feet, the ground on the platform also revealed a strange dark red color. Xiao Hui looked around for a while and then slowly moved forward in the huge space. Right now only its small figure was moving. The incessant red light shone down from above, reflecting its figure, leaving a long shadow behind it. Just like that, it slowly moved forward. Xiao Hui at times turned its head to look around. Just that, although the atmosphere here was extremely strange, but as Xiao Hui moved forward, nothing happened. Very soon, Xiao Hui reached the end of the platform. Standing at the end of the platform, the smell of blood was already at its strongest. Even Xiao Hui could not help but show disgust on its face, stretched out its palm and fanned continuously in front of its nose. At the end of the platform, in the middle of the huge cave, below was a deep blood pool. Xiao Hui slowly walked to the edge of the platform, carefully crouched on the rock, stretched out its head and looked down. What appeared in front of it was a huge pool of blood. The water in the pool was as red as blood, and countless small bubbles were constantly emerging from the bottom of the pool, bursting on the surface of the water and emitting a strong smell of blood. There were 4 gigantic spirit beasts in the blood, and they seemed to be imprisoned. Most of their bodies were soaked in the blood, and they looked weak and exhausted. Most of the time, they didn't move at all. Suddenly, Xiao Hui's body seemed to stiffen. At the same time, the eye in the middle of its forehead abruptly lit up. Among the 4 spiritual beasts, one looked like a dragon but not a dragon, sharp teeth and fangs. At first glance it looked like a pig. It was the savage torch dragon. The other was a one-legged huge body, its voice like thunder, soaked in the blood water but still like a small hill. It was the Eastern Sea Kuei Nyo. These 2 spiritual beasts, Xiao Hui had never seen them before, after a few glances, but the remaining 2 were spiritual beasts that it had seen before. One was shaped like a phoenix, gorgeous feathers, indistinctly had the might of the Emperor of Birds. It was the spiritual beast that guarded the celestial emperor treasury in the western Great Marsh, the yellow bird. And the last spiritual beast, it made Xiao Hui even more shocked and angered. It was the ferocious beast that followed. Beside the beast deity, after the beast deity passed away, it befriended Xiao Hui. Forget about the other 3 spiritual beasts being trapped. Anyway, Xiao Hui was not very familiar with them. Among them, the yellow bird even had some enmity with Xiao Hui. If Xiao Hui saw it in such a state, most likely it would even jump up and clap its hands in joy. But Xiao Hui and Tao Tai's friendship was not shallow. Looking at Tao Tai's listless and weak appearance soaked in blood, Xiao Hui immediately became anxious. A loudly called out from the platform. This call immediately broke the tranquility of the blood pool. The four great spiritual beasts were not ordinary animals. Although they were imprisoned by the strange formation here, their spiritual energy was almost completely absorbed, but they still raised their heads almost at the same time, looked up. Far away from the blood pool, on the side of the platform high up above, a monkey actually appeared, screaming loudly towards the bottom. The other three spiritual beasts had yet to react, but the Tao Tai had already recognized Xiao Hui at one glance. Its huge head turned and made a roar, just that this roar had only been made halfway before it weakly lowered down. It was obvious that the Tao Tai's spiritual energy had been depleted by 90% and it was already extremely exhausted. Xiao Hui saw Tao Tai's miserable state. It was even more furious, but in its shock and anger, it did not know what to do, scratched its ears and cheeks on the platform, anxiously pacing around. And in the blood pool below, the other spiritual beasts seemed to have noticed Xiao Hui's unusual behavior. It was not like those humans who usually set up the formation. For a moment, the cries of phoenixes and thunders, together with the indescribable "hung hung ho ho" of the candle dragon, were all heard, in which there was a pleading tone. The four spiritual beasts imprisoned by the four divinities' blood formation were originally extremely tyrannical heaven and earth spiritual beasts. They had never put anything in their eyes, not to mention being forced to plead like right now. From this, one could imagine the viciousness of the four divinities' blood formation. Even these primitive heaven and earth spiritual beasts could not withstand the torture of being devoured and soaked in blood. Waves of wails were heard. Xiao Hui was like an ant beside a hot pot, circling around. Suddenly, it seemed to have made up its mind, stamped its feet and actually leapt out from the platform. This action was seen by the four spiritual beasts below. Immediately a commotion broke out, but Xiao Hui's tail kept on swaying. Its body abruptly turned back in midair, like being carried by the wind. With a sound, it landed on the stone pillar below the platform. Monkeys were best at climbing, although the stone pillar was towering, but it was still very rough, rocks protruding out everywhere. Normal people would be intimidated by it, but to Xiao Hui, it was the best foothold. Xiao Hui's gray figure swiftly descended from the stone pillar, a distance of several zhongs. In a short while, it had already climbed down from the platform, nearing the blood pool. The blood water was right in front of it. The smell of blood made one want to vomit. The surrounding was all red water surface. Bubbles kept popping up from the front, back, left and right of the water surface, and then made soft sounds before bursting. The spiritual beast nearest to the stone pillar was not the Tao Tai but the eastern sea Kuei cow, whose body was as huge as a small hill. The Tao Tai was at the front left of the Kuei cow. Xiao Hui grabbed the stone pillar and looked down. With its intelligence, naturally it would not think of touching that terrifying and strange blood water below. After a while, Xiao Hui seemed to have seen something. Its four limbs retracted and then both of its legs abruptly stomped on the stone pillar. Borrowing this force, its entire body leapt out. This leap actually leapt over half a zhongs away, just happened to land on the Kuei cow's stomach where blood water was gushing out, following which, borrowing this foothold, it leapt with all its might again, its gray figure sweeping across a smooth trajectory on the blood water surface, just happened to land on the only part of the Tao Tai's head above the water surface. Zhi. Once it landed on the Tao Tai, Xiao Hui immediately cried out. At the same time both of its hands felt the exposed skin on the Tao Tai's head, like it was extremely concerned to see what kind of injuries its old friend had suffered. And the Tao Tai, that was usually extremely ferocious right now, seemed to be very pleased with Xiao Hui's arrival. Its mouth emitted a low roar. At the same time its head slowly turned. Around them, the other three spiritual beasts, soaking in the blood pool, were all silent, no longer made a sound, only silently watching the Taotai and Xiao Hui. Xiao Hui searched the hard skin on the Taotai's head for a while, stopped, as if it was puzzled. For a moment it could not make sense of the surrounding situation, sat on the Taotai's head, stretched out its hand and scratched its head. Unexpectedly at this moment, Xiao Hui seemed to be careless for a moment, forgot that the Taotai was not like the Kuei cow, only its head was exposed. The space left for the monkey to stand on was not big, it slightly relaxed. In a moment of inattention, the tip of its tail accidentally fell into the surrounding blood water. Xiao Hui, like it was suddenly scalded by boiling water, abruptly jumped up. The other spiritual beasts immediately stirred, low cries incessantly sounded, and the Taotai under Xiao Hui's feet was also startled, but it held on to Xiao Hui's head and did not dare to move recklessly, for fear that if it moved too violently it would throw Xiao Hui into the blood water. It could only growl continuously. At the same time its two bell-sized eyes desperately rolled upwards, trying to see what exactly was happening to Xiao Hui. Its appearance was like a human rolling his eyes, very funny. Xiao Hui grabbed its own tail and placed it in front of its eyes, saw that the short section of tail that touched the blood water, although it did not split the skin and flesh, but there were some signs of burning, as if it was scalded by a flame. The monkey was stunned for a moment and then puffed up its cheeks, fiercely blew a few mouthfuls of air at its tail, not knowing if by doing so, it could slightly reduce the pain. Following that, Xiao Hui loosened its tail and carefully stood properly. It then stretched out its hand and patted the Taotai's head, indicating that it was fine. The Taotai then calmed down and the other three spiritual beasts also calmed down. Just that after a moment, Xiao Hui's gaze swept past the Taotai and the other three spiritual beasts, saw that they were all powerlessly imprisoned in the pool of blood water. The anger in its eyes immediately intensified. The monkey's tail had only touched the blood water a little and it was already so powerful. These four spiritual beasts were actually soaked in the blood water all day long. The torment they were suffering was simply unimaginable. The anger in Xiao Hui's eyes grew, abruptly jumped up from the Taotai's head. Its mouth called out, at the same time stretched out its hand to pull the Taotai, as if it wanted to pull it up from the blood water. Looking at Xiao Hui's actions, the other three spiritual beasts again let out a series of low wails. At the same time the Taotai did not follow Xiao Hui's pull and stood up, on the contrary, its huge head was slowly shaking. Xiao Hui was stunned for a moment, called out twice, as if it did not understand. Just at that moment, a low thunderous sound was suddenly heard ahead. It was made by the Kuei Nyo, Xiao Hui, Taotai and the other two spiritual beasts. The candle dragon and the yellow bird looked over at the same time. The Kuei Nyo seemed to want to explain something. After a low roar, its entire huge body started to slowly tremble. Looking at its appearance, it actually had the intention to stand up. The rest of the spiritual beasts all stared intently at the Kuei Nyo. The Kuei Nyo's body was the largest among the four spiritual beasts. It seemed to have the best stamina as well, just that it trembled and struggled for a while. When its body was about to kneel and stand up, suddenly, above the blood pool they were in, four dark red light pillars appeared, as if it was real, immediately enveloping the four spiritual beasts in the dark red light. And the Kuei Nyo's struggling huge body seemed to immediately lose its strength. Like a small mountain toppling, with a sound, it once again fell into the blood pool. Blood splattered everywhere. In the mournful cries indistinctly carried some desolation. And the other spiritual beasts that were enveloped by the dark red light pillars, at the same time, also revealed pained expressions. Xiao Hui stood on the Taotai's head, under the dark red light pillar. Naturally it was also enveloped, but for some reason, probably because Xiao Hui was not under any restraints, Xiao Hui was only startled for a moment and then felt that it was fine. The four light pillars shot down from above, after enveloping the four spiritual beasts. Very soon, in the dark red light flashing, strands of fine white spiritual energy were sucked out from the spiritual beasts' bodies, quietly drifting upwards. Seeing this scene, Xiao Hui naturally understood everything, abruptly lifted its head, its 3 eyes opened wide, especially that golden eye in the middle of its forehead. Golden light flashed, strange splendor circulated. The dark red pillar of light enveloping the 4 spirit beasts slowly thinned from the bottom to the top, then gradually rose. In the end, it was fired from a strange cauldron that was hovering in the air over 100 feet taller than the platform in the sky. Xiao Hui stared intently at that strange cauldron, suddenly made a sharp cry, both of its feet stomped, its body had already left the Taotai's head, leapt straight towards the Kuei Nyo. The other spiritual beasts all stared at Xiao Hui. Xiao Hui's body was gliding in the air, but its body had already changed. The golden eye in its forehead glowed brightly, shooting out dazzling rays of light, and from within its body, violent sounds of G G G G were heard, as if even its bones were trembling. The distance of several zhangs, Xiao Hui crossed it in one leap, landed on the Kuei Nyo's huge body. Its body was already enveloped by a layer of golden light. Its body was more than twice its usual size, but this was clearly not the end. Xiao Hui did not seem to stop on the Kuei Nyo. In the continuous sharp cries, it suddenly leapt again, its body again leapt into the air. This time it leapt towards the stone pillar. And this time, while gliding in the air, Xiao Hui's body changed again. From the depths of the golden light, a layer of strange red light suddenly surged out, instantly intertwining with the golden light, a sound like thunder and wind howling. The 3-eyed spiritual monkey's body expanded. Like the legendary metamorphosis, it had transformed into an overzhang's huge monkey, 3 eyes red like blood, sharp fangs protruding from its mouth, awe-inspiring, its baleful aura surging. Pooh! A loud sound. Xiao Hui, who had transformed into a huge beast, pounced onto the stone pillar. The entire huge stone pillar shook incessantly. At the same time, Xiao Hui did not hesitate, roared unceasingly and quickly climbed up. The several zhangs tall stone pillar, right now in between the huge monkey's limbs, was only a short distance. In a short while, Xiao Hui's huge body had already flipped over the platform, landed on the ground with a loud crash, looked up at the hidden dragon cauldron floating in the air. The huge monkey beat its chest with its hands, raised its head and loudly shouted, "Frowny face ho!" This sound was shocking. With one roar, it felt as if the weather had changed. The silence in the huge cave was finally completely broken. The roar traveled far, the dark red light in the air trembled. The circle of light on the hidden dragon cauldron also trembled, following which those rays of red light, as if they had intelligence, slowly turned over. Facing this strange formation and unknown object, Xiao Hui bared its teeth, its face full of ferocity, raised its head and roared. The next moment, both of its legs suddenly stomped on the ground. In that instant its huge monkey body soared into the air, a distance of several zhangs. The huge monkey flew up with a loud rumble. Its power was terrifying. Halfway the red figures all retreated. It looked like it was about to hit the hidden dragon cauldron. Just that the 4 divinities' blood formation was after all not to be underestimated. When the hidden dragon cauldron was about to hit, a layer of dark red like blood suddenly appeared around it. Xiao Hui's huge body collided with this layer of light. Such a huge force was turned into nothingness. It could not advance an inch and fell back again. Chapter 480. And immediately after, the 4 divinities' blood formation had already started its counterattack. In the air, numerous dark red figures gathered over, looking from afar. The hidden dragon cauldron looked like a strange red sun, surrounded by tens of thousands of red lights, forming an enormous light screen. And on the light screen, several hundred red protrusions gradually appeared, each 3 chi square. The next moment, sounds of explosions instantly filled the entire cave. These several hundred red protrusions exploded at the same time. From within shot out strange round objects like blood bubbles, like rain falling from the sky, like a storm shot towards Xiao Hui's falling body. Xiao Hui howled to the sky, its howl like thunder. The golden red light around its body became even hotter. Once its body landed, it flipped out. Its movements were extremely agile, almost weightless. The strange objects that shot down from the sky smashed onto the ground of the platform one after another. In an instant, the hard rock ground was corroded and large holes were formed. Strange hissing sounds were heard, and it was hair-raising. This storm-like attack had just ended. Without waiting for Xiao Hui to catch its breath, the terrifying light screen in the air changed again. On the enormous red light screen, several protrusions protruded out, but this time each protrusion was 5 zhangs large and extremely fast. Without waiting for Xiao Hui to react, those new protrusions had already exploded again. What burst out from within were not the round corrosive monsters but blood-red skeletons, some wielding swords, some spitting venom, some spitting fire, some spitting ice, etc. monsters, roaring and pouncing down from the sky, brandishing their fangs and claws at Xiao Hui. This terrifying scene was like hell. Right now in the enormous cave the wind was howling, the blood in the blood pool was also surging incessantly. The 4 spiritual beasts seemed to be extremely enraged. All of them raised their heads and howled, howling again and again. On the platform, several gigantic skeletons pounced down together, but Xiao Hui, facing such a scene, did not back down. Both of its hands clenched into fists and pounded its chest, opened its mouth, and with a loud cry, it did not retreat and instead advanced, charged head-on towards the skeleton army that was charging over like tidewater, turned into a grey gigantic figure and instantly charged into the blood-red formation. Hoa! A deafening roar like thunder, tearing apart the mortal world, Xiao Hui charged into the group of skeletons, dashed left and killed right, its huge hands waved wildly. Immediately a few skeletons in front of it were sent flying. A skeleton in front of it was about to swing its blade over. Xiao Hui punched out, forcefully deflecting the blade onto the skull of the skeleton. At the same time it kicked out, a dong. The skeleton was kicked far away, flying out of the platform, falling into the blood pool. The surrounding skeletons continued to howl, one after another surrounded, as if they did not know fear, all kinds of vicious moves, for a moment from all directions, pounced on Xiao Hui's huge body. In just a short while, Xiao Hui's grey fur had already burned 5, 6 wounds, some of which had already turned black. Obviously it was highly toxic. Under the intense pain, the giant monkey seemed to have become even more ferocious. It turned around and struck out with its palm. Like the rumbling of thunder and lightning, a huge gust of wind swept past. Under the loud rumbling sound, the heads of the 3 skeletons fell to the ground. They even spun a few rounds on the ground. The remaining headless bodies rushed forward a few steps before collapsing. After this round, Xiao Hui was incomparably ferocious, had already crippled more than half of the skeletons, but there were also quite a number of wounds on its body, just that these wounds seemed to incite Xiao Hui's ferociousness. The eye on its forehead glowed brightly. With a loud roar, it charged towards the remaining skeletons again. Those skeletons also charged forward without fear of death. Xiao Hui charged into the formation, lifted its leg and kicked a skeleton beside it into pieces, following which a sudden pain from its back. A skeleton wielding a huge saber behind it cried out continuously. The saber slashed deeply into Xiao Hui's back. Xiao Hui, with a loud roar, turned around abruptly. Blood splattered everywhere from its back, blood splattered out. That skeleton seemed to be stunned for a moment and could not react. Xiao Hui's huge hand grabbed that skeleton, with a roar, threw it far away, crashing into the hard cave wall far away, immediately smashed into pieces. There was no time to look at the result of the battle. The ferocious glint in Xiao Hui's eyes intensified, turned around and pounced. A skeleton beside it holding a long spear stabbed over. Xiao Hui did not even look, stretched out its hand and grabbed the spear, pulled it over. Unexpectedly that skeleton was also ferocious. The spear in its hand did not let go, its entire body was also pulled over, still trying to stab at Xiao Hui in the air. Xiao Hui was even more enraged. The long spear in its hand suddenly raised to its head, like a windmill suddenly spun away. Woo woo woo. The sound of the wind immediately sounded. That skeleton that was carried by the long spear instead became an extremely long weapon in Xiao Hui's hand. Immediately several skeletons nearby were sent flying, although the platform was spacious, but to Xiao Hui and these skeletons right now with their huge bodies, it was no different than a round table, one after another immediately fell off the platform into the blood pool. Plop, plop, sounds were heard continuously. The several skeletons all fell into the blood pool. Most of them were still struggling, looked like they still wanted to complete their mission and return to the platform to fight to the death with that ferocious monkey. Just that before they could stop in the blood pool, suddenly a few huge figures had already appeared in front of them. Right now the four divinities' blood formation was busy fighting with Xiao Hui. The dark red light shield on the four spiritual beasts had already been withdrawn, although these spiritual beasts were already depleted of spiritual energy, but they were tyrannical spiritual beasts that had lived for thousands of years. How could they be ordinary? Pa, 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 pa. Crisp sounds rang out incessantly. Although the four great spirit beasts couldn't look down on the skeletons like they used to, their huge bodies were still there. They directly approached the skeletons and crushed more than half of the skeletons. These few days, these spiritual beasts had really been bullied hard. The anger in their hearts was not a small matter. After suppressing and suppressing, until 7, 8 times, they were panting, as if the hatred was still not vented. And one or two of the skeletons who had luckily fallen further away were about to paddle away when those spiritual beasts suddenly turned their heads, one by one opened their ferocious mouths and directly bit them, swallowed them whole. And the few spiritual beasts in the blood pool spat out the resentment in their hearts. The fierce battle on the platform also continued. Several skeletons were beaten down. On the platform there were only 3 or 4 skeletons left, unceasingly hacking at Xiao Hui. But to Xiao Hui, these were even less of a problem. It pounced forward, smashed and kicked. Immediately a few of them were crippled. Only one skeleton was still ferociously pouncing over. Xiao Hui's ferocious nature was aroused. It did not even look at the chopping saber. With a loud roar pounced over, knocked the skeleton down with one palm, opened its big mouth and bit on the skull. Its sharp fangs also pierced in. That skull shook a few times and immediately shattered. Xiao Hui stood up, looked around, extremely pleased. It raised its head to the hidden dragon cauldron in the sky and roared loudly. Both of its hands clenched into fists and pounded its chest, extremely savage. The four divinities' blood formation in the air did not expect Xiao Hui to be so strong, paused for that moment, but then the red light screen lit up again. This time the light was restrained. The red light on the hidden dragon cauldron slowly circulated. The evil face on the ancient cauldron suddenly flashed its eyes, as if it came alive, its ferocious state indescribable. Just that although the hidden dragon cauldron's ferocious energy flourished, but the Qian Kuan lock, which was like a light dagger tightly nailed onto the evil face, did not seem to be moved at all. No matter how the red light from the hidden dragon cauldron attacked, it was still like a nail piercing into the evil demon's forehead, causing the surrounding blood to be unable to gather. Just when the hidden dragon cauldron's red light counterattacked, the atmosphere of the great battle had a short moment of respite. Xiao Hui's huge body stood on the platform, roared loudly at the hidden dragon cauldron floating in the air, intending to provoke it, who knew that the hidden dragon cauldron suddenly became silent, without any reaction. Xiao Hui stared for a while. The golden eye on its forehead glimmered. Suddenly its body paused, as if it saw something. With a low roar, casually grabbed a skull beside it and threw it towards the hidden dragon cauldron in the air. The skull had just reached the hidden dragon cauldron, and just like the last time when Xiao Hui attacked, it was blocked by a layer of red light screen. Xiao Hui roared again and again on the ground, picked up the scattered bones and unceasingly threw them towards the hidden dragon cauldron. The sharp whistling sound was incessant. The sound became sharper and sharper. Xiao Hui's strength after its transformation was so powerful, although the hidden dragon cauldron's light shield in the air was stable, but for some reason, it seemed that the cauldron's spiritual energy was mostly retracted to deal with that small light pillar. The outer light shield did not move at all at the beginning, but later on it started to sway. Xiao Hui, who was standing below, saw it clearly. Immediately its confidence was boosted. It howled again and again. Immediately the broken bones were like rain, thrown up from below, heavily hitting that dark red light screen. Ever since the four divinities' blood formation was set up, most likely it had never been in such a wretched state, especially when facing the enemy. It was actually a monkey, although Xiao Hui was not an ordinary monkey, and the four divinities' blood formation itself also had the Qian Kuan lock. But if Mr. Ghost and the rest saw this scene, they would definitely vomit blood in anger. Under Xiao Hui's strange bone-crushing attack, the hidden dragon cauldron's outer light screen was struggling left and right, almost unable to hold on, and above the hidden dragon cauldron, waves of blood-red light were still charging towards that evil demon face. Clearly to the hidden dragon cauldron, it seemed more important was instead to attack that white Qian Kuan lock. At this crucial moment, Xiao Hui, who was happily throwing things on the platform, was suddenly startled. The ground around it, without knowing when there was nothing left, so many broken bones, were actually all thrown out by it. Xiao Hui bellowed, looked up and saw that after it had exhausted all its food and ammunition, the light screen above had a chance to catch its breath and was already showing signs of stabilizing again. Xiao Hui stamped its feet and howled, extremely furious, suddenly fiercely smashed its hand on the ground. Its strength right now was so great, although the ground was hard, but how could it withstand the power of a ferocious monkey? Immediately rocks flew. Xiao Hui's 3 eyes suddenly brightened, stretched out its hand and hit the ground wildly. Immediately in the rumbling sounds, rocks flew everywhere. Xiao Hui did not hesitate, snatched those big rocks and again threw them towards the hidden dragon cauldron. The hardness of the rocks was even stronger than the skeletons and bones. The previous bone-shattering attack had turned into the current stone storm. The strength had increased by 30% and the ammunition was endless. Like a storm, it surged and roared. The light shield that had just stabilized immediately became a mess. Under the bombardment of the rocks, after a crisp sound, the red light shield dissipated and revealed the true body of the hidden dragon cauldron. Xiao Hui, who was standing on the platform, saw it clearly. With an excited roar, even the 4 spiritual beasts in the blood pool also became excited, roaring continuously. Xiao Hui did not hesitate, snatched the biggest huge rock next to it. It was the size of a human. With a loud roar, heavily threw it towards the hidden dragon cauldron. This giant rock was as fast as lightning, carrying with it an unparalleled power. It charged straight up, and without the light shield to block it halfway, a moment later, it finally smashed directly onto the cauldron of the hidden dragon, making a muffled dong sound. The hidden dragon cauldron shook violently, the red light on it immediately became chaotic, and the blood energy that gathered around the evil face also flowed back. The ancient cauldron, which was originally floating stably in the air, finally tilted a little from Xiao Hui's attack, disrupted its footing. But perhaps it was because of that, the red light on the hidden dragon cauldron instantly lit up. The entire cauldron almost turned red. A huge and strange mysterious power finally appeared again, and as if responding to it, that Qian Kuan light-locking dagger on the cauldron also suddenly shone brightly. The thick stench of blood instantly filled the air, and the entire huge cavern began to shake. Rocks fell from the huge cracks on the stone walls on all 4 sides, as if a demon had been awakened. The blood-red light exploded, and it stared ferociously at the savage giant monkey from mid-air below. The tremors swiftly grew larger, instantly turned into a violent power, shaking the entire majestic Fox Mountain range. Far away from the blood pool, the Ghost King Sect cave was once again shrouded in despair and fear. In the Ghost King's stone chamber, Ghostly and Mr. Ghost abruptly looked up. The unprecedentedly thick smell of blood even filled their stone chamber. The ground was shaking violently, and after their initial shock, the astrolabe in front of them seemed to be suddenly summoned by some mysterious power, finally changed again. All of the ancient characters on the astrolabe instantly lit up. The gentle white light was so bright that one could not look at it. The speed at which the small jade pieces slid suddenly increased by more than 10 times. They whizzed through the center of the astrolabe like lightning. It was as if the fate of heaven and earth, in the blink of an eye, had undergone an intense change. Further away, in the cold stone chamber, the violent quakes and the rocks falling from the walls were not inferior to before. In this apocalyptic scene, Ghost King instead slowly stood up. A strange expression appeared on his face, like ecstasy, like agitation, like ferociousness, like thirst. His voice also turned low and hoarse, quietly reverberated in the empty stone chamber. This day has finally arrived, and at the summit of majestic Fox Mountain, Xiao Bai's figure suddenly shook. A tremor was felt from her feet. She did not sense wrongly. The entire majestic Fox Mountain range was shaking. Something that had never happened in 10,000 years happened today. A mocking smile flashed past her cold face, suddenly fluttered. A white shadow floated, swept down the mountain. Looking at the direction, it was the entrance to the Ghost King's sect cave. Chapter 481. The ground was shaking violently, the surrounding rocks started to fall, and the astrolabe released thousands of resplendent lights, illuminating the entire Ghost King's stone chamber. In the air, the pungent smell of blood assaulted the nostrils. The strong smell almost made one feel as if one was immersed in a sea of blood. Ghostly did not know why this sudden change happened, but after the initial shock, he suddenly realized, turned and shouted, "Xiao Hui!" His shout came from afar, and not long after, the echo of his shout came from the stone chamber. Then, it was suppressed by an even more violent tremor. Amidst the rumbling, the dust above his head scattered in all directions, and the falling stones became bigger and bigger. But there was no reply. That familiar cries did not come over. Anxiety surfaced on Ghost Lee's face. After a slight hesitation, his eyes were already staring at the inner room. Mr. Ghost had also moved over. The black veil made it hard to see his expression, but his tone right now did not seem to be flustered. Instead, in the strange calmness, indistinctly revealed a sense of excitement. "Your monkey should be inside, right?" Mr. Ghost beside Ghostly indifferently said. Ghostly glanced at him, without hesitation. His body moved and had already swept into the chamber. Then his body stiffened, stood where he was, in the empty chamber. That dark secret door on the stone wall was like a deep black hole, coldly staring at him. Behind him, a light suddenly shifted over. It was Mr. Ghost holding the astrolabe, which kept on radiating dazzling light. When he saw that secret door on the wall, he was clearly stunned. Seemed like he too did not expect a secret door to suddenly open, or maybe he knew about the secret door but did not expect it to open. For a while he did not speak. Both of them were highly skilled people. After standing in the chamber for a moment, they could already sense that the source of the thick smell of blood was in this dark secret door. Ghost Lee's face turned cold, looked deeply at Mr. Ghost. Mr. Ghost's eyes glimmered. After a moment of hesitation, indifferently said, "Don't look at me. These few days I have never left your side. I also do not know what is going on." Ghostly coldly snorted, although his heart was filled with suspicions, but right now the quakes were getting more and more violent, and the missing Xiao Hui clearly left from this hole. No matter what, now was not the time to pursue. He made a prompt decision, coldly said, "Let's go in." Mr. Ghost frowned, seemed to be hesitating, was about to say something, but Ghost Lee's figure flashed, already dashed into the darkness of the secret door. He stood there silently for a moment, looked at the glimmering astrolabe in his hand and then at that secret door, suddenly sighed, said, "Man proposes but God disposes, actually let a monkey spoil the important matter." After speaking, he shook his head with a bitter laugh. His black figure also floated up, swept into the secret door. The passage in the secret door was narrow and long. Following Ghost Lee's rapid advance, the terrain gradually turned downwards. The surroundings also started to become damp, but the most disgusting thing was, the deeper he went, the thicker the stench of blood became. Ghostly was currently in the tunnel. The surrounding solid stone walls were also trembling violently. If an ordinary person were to walk here, they would really have the fear that the stone walls would collapse and bury them alive. But Ghost Lee's face right now did not show any such worry. only his figure moving faster and faster. In a short while, he had already reached the other side of the tunnel, landed and looked up. Right in front of him was the already frantically flickering red light and a long platform wrapped in red shadows, and from the direction of the platform, a faint but familiar roar could be heard. Ghost Li's countenance changed slightly. That roar, he could tell, was Xiao Hui's roar after its transformation, but what exactly was in the red shadow, what kind of danger was it, could actually make Xiao Hui transform into this life-and-death battle? Without hesitation, like lightning, like the wind, charged into the dark red light, and behind him, Mr. Ghost also slowly floated down from the cave entrance. After he steadied himself, he did not do anything but first looked back. Behind where he was standing, one was the cave entrance, the other side was an equally dark passage. Mr. Ghost was looking at this other passage. He stared at that dark passage for a moment, then slowly looked away, at the astrolabe in his hand. After that, the radiance from the astrolabe not only did not weaken, instead it became even more dazzling. At the same time, in the halo, golden ancient characters kept appearing in the center of the astrolabe, lit up in the white light and then slowly fell down, extremely mystical, like it was trying its best to respond to something. Mr. Ghost looked up ahead. That dark red light flickered chaotically and frantically. Waves of huge air currents surged. In addition to the violent earthquakes and trembling walls, it seemed to be announcing some great danger. However, in the face of all this, a smile appeared in his eyes. He took a step forward and walked toward the dark red shadow with light and quick steps. Ghost Li charged into that dark red light. Almost at the same time the red light shone on him. Even with his skills, he suddenly felt a slight dizziness, although he had recovered in a blink, but the scene before him still shocked him. The enormous blood pool, the collapsed walls, the stench of blood in the air, were all within his expectations. At this moment, a humanoid monster that was formed from countless crimson blood chi appeared in the air. It was over 100 feet tall, and almost filled the entire cave. At the end of the platform, Xiao Hui, who had transformed into a giant monkey, roared loudly without fear, but its size was too different from this giant. Most importantly, right now Xiao Hui looked like it had no power to retaliate. When that blood giant kept spitting out blood-like enormous flames from its mouth, it could only keep dodging. That violent blood flame continuously struck down from mid-air, sweeping everything, wherever it passed. Even the extremely hard rocks melted. Although Xiao Hui was not an ordinary person, it also did not dare to take it head-on and could only jump here and there on the platform, dodging in the midst of the danger. Looking at its gray fur, it was already covered with cuts and bruises. Clearly it had suffered a lot. Right now it was just forcing itself to hang on, struggling at death's door. And at this moment, Xiao Hui leapt up with all its might, narrowly avoided a stream of blood flame that swept past it. Even in the air it felt a burning sensation on its fur, could not help but roared loudly. But it looked like this time it still managed to evade. It landed from the air. Who knew that when both of its feet touched the ground, it suddenly felt a sharp pain in its feet. The pain almost penetrated into its bones. Xiao Hui looked down and saw that the surface of the rocks on the platform had already turned into molten rock. Both of its feet were charred and the flesh on its feet was exposed. This pain was no small matter. Xiao Hui's huge body tottered and the blood giant in the sky did not seem to have any mercy. Another layer of blood flame covered the sky and earth. Xiao Hui looked like it was about to be smashed into pieces. The huge monkey cried out to the sky. Far below it, there seemed to be a few angry cries, but obviously it was of no use. The blazing blood flame struck down from above. Xiao Hui's 3 eyes also seemed to have turned into the red shadow of the blood flame. At this critical moment, suddenly a long cry was heard from behind, like a dragon's cry. A stream of green light like a rainbow streaked across the sky in an arc, like a sudden clap of thunder, like a flash of lightning, arrived dangerously, instantly formed a green light shield in front of Xiao Hui. In the green light a sharp glint flashed, a Taiji diagram appeared, glistening brilliantly. In a loud sound, it forcibly blocked that blood giant's seemingly indestructible blood flame. It was Ghostly who had arrived at the critical moment. Just that although this attack was blocked, but Ghostly's body shook violently, his vision turned black, not to mention the light shield that he had conjured almost dissipated. His body also almost fell into the blood pool from the attack. Fortunately his skills were profound. When his body fell, he used the edge of the stone platform and floated up, swept to the huge monkey. His eyes swiftly swept past Xiao Hui. Without saying anything, he directly grabbed Xiao Hui's body. With a low shout, with one hand, Xiao Hui's huge body was lifted off the ground. Xiao Hui cried out in pain, its body floated up, its bones made cracking sounds in the air. The next moment its body swiftly shrunk. In a blink it had already returned to its normal size, became that little gray monkey. At this moment, the blood-chi giant above seemed to have become increasingly angry because someone had suddenly blocked its blood-chi flames. Its target had also shifted to Ghostly. It opened its huge mouth, and with a bang sound, a 5-feet-long blood-chi flame gushed out. Like a fire dragon descending from the sky, it burned towards Ghostly. Ghostly grabbed Xiao Hui, placed it on his shoulder, shouted, "Hold on tight!" Following which his body floated up again. His current movement speed was much more agile than Xiao Hui, also much faster, although that blood giant's blood flame was extremely powerful, but he was always shuttling back and forth between the gaps of the blood flame, looked much more at ease. And Xiao Hui was also not idling around, it who had reverted to its usual body. One hand grabbed onto Ghostly's shoulder, allowing Ghostly to shuttle up and down in the air. It still sat steadily, the other hand hurriedly grabbed onto its own legs to look, its face revealing a pained expression, a zzz, calling out incessantly and then using its hands to fanning its own 2 feet, probably feeling uncomfortable from the scalding. But when Ghostly heard Xiao Hui's cries and at the same time saw Xiao Hui's movements, his heart instead calmed down. To be able to fan and cry out in pain, it seemed that other than some superficial wounds, it was not seriously injured. After slightly calming down, Ghostly's flying body became more at ease. Although the streams of blood flame were powerful but their momentum was slow, in his eyes it was nothing to be afraid of, and taking advantage of this opportunity, he started to observe the surroundings and that blood giant in the gaps between the blood flame. Deep below his feet, like an abyss, but the blood pool in the abyss was a strange sight, especially when Ghostly saw the 4 spiritual beasts soaking in the blood pool. He was immediately stunned. Among the 4 spiritual beasts, other than the savage candle dragon, the other 3 spiritual beasts had a close relationship with him. Unexpectedly they were all imprisoned here. And in his heart, he suddenly recalled that Ghost King had exhausted the entire Ghost King sect's strength these few years, from the earliest Kuei Nyo 10 years ago to now the 4 great spiritual beasts all gathered, so it was all to set up this strange formation here? His heart was moved, abruptly lifted his head, looked at that blood giant. A stream of blood flame struck over, the surrounding wind was like fire. Ghostly's figure like an apparition instantly flashed several zhongs away, evading it. That stream of blood flame hit the stone wall behind him, causing rocks to fly wildly, leaving a several zhongs large hole on the solid stone wall. Ghostly floated in the air and gazed from afar, saw that the giant's entire body was made up of blood-colored spiritual energy, the red light like clouds, steaming and rolling incessantly. The 2 huge eyes on its face glowed fiercely, burning fiercely like raging flames, staring intently at Ghostly, opened its mouth and another stream of blood flame blasted over. This giant's spiritual energy seemed to be inexhaustible, never-ending. Chapter 482. Ghostly dodged once again, but this time, a sharp glint flickered in his eyes. He did not stay where he was, but instead followed the direction of the blood flames, charging upwards at a distance of less than 3 feet away from the blazing blood flames. Shockingly, he charged towards the blood chi giant. Xiao Hui crouched on Ghostly's shoulder, watched as it neared the terrifying giant but did not show the slightest fear, instead excitedly cried out, waving its fists, with the spirit to fight to the death. The blood giant did not seem to expect Ghost Lee's sudden counterattack, and in addition its body was too huge. Naturally it could not react in time. In a blink, Ghostly turned into a green shadow, like an arrow leaving the bow, shot into the blood giant body. As soon as it entered his body, Ghostly instantly felt a heavy pressure coming from all directions. His body instantly slowed down, and at the same time, his ears were instantly filled with frenzied cries, like the cries of ghosts from hell, and his chi and blood roiled. In front of him was a blur of blood mist. Unable to see anything clearly, he frowned. A golden light flashed on his face. With a thought, a marvelous technique was born. His body's solemn golden light lit up, his bearing grand. In a blink the blood outside his body was forced back 3 feet. The discomfort in his body also improved. Unexpectedly the surrounding blood mist changed again. In the vast red mist, countless human faces appeared around Ghostly. The expressions on the faces were joy, sorrow, anger, savagery, etc., like thousands of ghosts gathered, surrounding Ghostly. "Save me! Give me your life! Don't go! Go and die!" Countless noises suddenly appeared, like a flood swarming over. Thousands of red arms, stretched out from the blood mist, grabbed towards Ghostly. The horror could not be described with words. Just that this kind of ghostly illusionary heart skill, to others it was a superb skill that had always been successful, but encountering Ghost Lee's Buddhism mind-calming skill, great Brahman wisdom, it just happened to meet its nemesis. Buddhism's supreme supernatural powers was the great enemy of the ghost way. The surrounding thousands of ghost faces seemed to be surging with unparalleled might, but once it neared the golden light around Ghostly, they all made sharp cries, dodging frantically. A few who could not dodge in time were already burnt by the golden Buddha light. In a blink turned into ashes and dispersed with the wind. With such a great skill protecting him, Ghostly was even more fearless. His body charged forward, although there were countless ghost faces in front of him, but they did not dare to face him. All retreated. A sound, he had already passed through the blood giant's body, dashed out. Boom! The blood chi giant let out a strange roar, as if it was extremely angry, and its huge body slowly turned around. Although Ghostly successfully passed through, the expression on his face became very serious. This monster's body was completely formed by blood chi. It was tangible but not tangible. He had just passed through it. It seemed that it did not affect it at all. In this way, he could only take a beating and not fight back. And seeing that the monster's spirit energy was so abundant, and the spirit energy in the cave was surging, Ghostly could clearly feel that there was constantly scattered spirit energy flowing into the giant's body. If this continued, he would only tire himself to death first. Just as Ghostly was thinking about how to deal with this seemingly invincible blood chi monster, the blood chi giant suddenly changed. The huge blood chi body suddenly collapsed and countless blood chi spurted out, forming a thick blood mist that churned violently in the air. However, there was no sign of it dissipating. Instead, it became tighter and tighter, finally turning into a crimson blood chi ball about 10 feet in size. It was like a red sun, emitting tens of thousands of rays of red light in the air. Just when Ghostly was stunned, deep inside the blood ball, a loud sound suddenly burst out. A moment later, from the blood mist condensed into a ball, thousands of red tentacles shot out. Every tentacle was as thick as a bowl, more than 10 feet long. Blood chi steamed, dancing in the air. In an instant, the entire huge cave turned into a sea of red tentacles. The powerful blood flame Ghostly could avoid it, but right now facing the thousands of tentacles that were everywhere, even Ghostly could not help but felt his scalp go numb, his face changing color. From the initial battle with Xiao Hui, the corrosive ball, summoning skeletons, and then the blood giant, and now the blood ball with thousands of tentacles, the strange power and mysterious formation in the cave seemed to have endless strange powers. In its savagery there were thousands of changes, making one unable to not feel despair. powerless to deal with it. Duo, 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 duo. A sharp piercing sound, the tentacles covered the sky and covered the earth, charged over from all directions. There was nowhere to retreat, nowhere to hide. Ghost Lee's face was solemn, with a loud shout. His entire body shone with golden light at the same time, forming a light cover enveloping himself and Xiao Hui. At the same time his magical weapon Soul Devourer appeared in his hand for the first time. In just a blink of an eye, in a sharp whistling sound, the sky full of red tentacles swooped down, immediately encircling Ghost Lee's light shield, not to mention airtight. Not even a bit of golden light could be seen. What reflected in the eyes were layers upon layers of red tentacles tightly bound together, forming a strange red ball in the air. Those red tentacles slightly wriggled, looked like they were trying their best to tighten, squeezing inwards, and the red ball that was surrounded by the red tentacles slowly caved in. The next moment it rebounded back to its original state, but the surrounding red tentacles again exerted force, again caved in a little more. Just that the rebounding force seemed to be stronger, slowly bounced back. Just like this, it was like a heartbeat but also like breathing. It repeated many times, and suddenly, an explosive sound came from the red sphere. A moment later, it turned into a loud bang. A large number of red tentacles seemed to have exploded, and were immediately torn into pieces by the huge force, turning into red smoke and dissipating in all directions. Under the afterimage, Ghost Lee's figure shot out like lightning, flew out from the air and landed on the platform in the middle of the blood pool, but his body softened, almost lost his footing. Looking at Ghost Lee's extremely pale face, indistinctly heard his panting. With his current skills, he was actually forced to such a state by this strange enemy. One could imagine the power of the four divinities' blood formation. Just that the four divinities' blood formation and the hidden dragon cauldron were obviously not like that, although Ghostly managed to escape. But the large number of red tentacles that exploded in midair, to that huge ball of blood in midair, seemed to be nothing at all. In fact, after those tentacles exploded and turned into red smoke, in a blink most of it was sucked back by that strange red ball. Such an endless cycle of spirit energy. No matter how powerful the person was, they would also be defeated at the mere sight of it. Just that the next moment, even more red tentacles grew out from the red blood ball floating in the air, countless of long red tentacles waving in the air. It was really terrifying. Even Ghostly felt a chill in his heart. Looking at more red tentacles covering the sky, making sounds, about to descend again, Ghostly already had the intention to retreat. This kind of ghost did not seem to be from the mortal world, not something a human could withstand. Just when he was about to move to avoid the red tentacles that pounced down like a storm, sweeping towards that cave entrance, suddenly the monkey Xiao Hui, who had been crouching tightly on his shoulder, gave a sharp cry. Its cry was urgent, as if it had discovered something, used its hand to point at that huge red ball in the sky. Ghostly was surprised. All his energy was focused on dealing with the terrifying red tentacles. How would he have the time to observe that red ball? Right now in his haste he abruptly raised his head and glanced at the red ball in the direction where Xiao Hui was pointing. What he saw made him stop in his tracks. He saw that in the deepest part of the blood-red sphere, a faint white radiance suddenly lit up. It was completely different from the violent and ferocious blood-red radiance around it. Almost at the moment when the white radiance lit up, the insufferably arrogant and strange red sphere monster also changed. It was as if someone had pierced a hole from the inside in an instant, and the red light rapidly dimmed. The red tentacles that filled the sky stiffened in mid-air and stopped for a moment. Most of them turned into red smoke, and the remaining half shrank back. The red sphere that was originally more than 100 feet in size also rapidly shrank. Those blood-red lights in the air rapidly rolled, with a strong frenzy but helpless. Even at a distance, Ghostly could still indistinctly feel that frenzy and teeth-gnashing ruthlessness. The sudden change before his eyes caused him to be dazzled and dumbfounded. But as the red light in the sky gradually weakened, under Ghost Lee's intense gaze, the demonic red cloud in the deepest part of the red ball was finally revealed. The blood-red light there was the darkest, looking from afar, so thick that it looked like blood was about to drip out, and that heaven and earth reversing white light, was shot out from the deepest part of the red cloud, although compared to the ferocious blood-red air around it looked weak, but it did not show any signs of wavering. On the contrary, around this light dagger-like white light, the blood-red light slowly lost its color, gradually dissipated. Ghostly even suddenly realized, the earthquake under his feet and the surrounding walls of the huge cave, the violent tremors had also gradually calmed down, only that bloody stench in the air was still so thick, not knowing if it was because of the blood pool under his feet was too much. The blood aura in the air was still fading away, and a red light was constantly emitting a sharp whistling sound as it rapidly passed by. It was as if it was extremely unwilling but helpless. Finally, after the red cloud completely dissipated, the true face of the red cloud was revealed. An ancient cauldron with an ancient form, exuding vicissitudes of life, engraved with strange inscriptions. The front of the cauldron had a strange evil demon face. In the middle of the face's forehead, that dazzling white light beam was shot out from here. Hidden Dragon Cauldron. Ghostly immediately recognized, this ancient cauldron was Ghost King's most prized and most mysterious magical weapon in the past. Ghostly unhurriedly turned around, his eyes retracted from the hidden dragon cauldron suspended in the air, looked around, the already dilapidated and full of cracks on the four walls of the cave, the strange and terrifying huge blood pool beneath his feet, and the powerless and in pain imprisoned within, the four spiritual beasts who were obviously under a mysterious prohibition. All of these, could it be Ghost King's doing? And that terrifying strange power above his head, the formless monster, something that should not even exist in this mortal world, could it be that it was also summoned by Ghost King? This kind of behavior, other than the word perverse, there was really no other words that could describe it. Xiao Hui right now also seemed to have lost its usual restless nature after the fierce battle, quietly crouched on Ghost Li's shoulder, but its three eyes, kept staring at the hidden dragon cauldron in the sky, seemed to still be fearful of that mysterious power. Ghostly with a solemn face stood for a long time and then unhurriedly walked to the end of the platform, the ground below his feet after that intense fight. The fish in the moat were affected, the hard ground had long become uneven, everywhere big and small holes caused by corrosion or huge force. He stood at the edge of the platform, like Xiao Hui at the beginning, bent down and looked down. Xiao Hui, who was crouching on his shoulder, also looked away from the hidden dragon cauldron, quietly cried out a few times, as if pleading, begging Ghostly to save the Taotai and the other spiritual beasts below. A strange glint flashed in Ghostly's eyes, his brows tightly locked together. Just now, when he saw the four spiritual beasts in the chaos, he already felt something was wrong. Now that he looked carefully, he realized that these four so-called ancient spiritual beasts were all heavily injured. Their spiritual energy that they relied on to run rampant was mostly gone. Chapter 483. Ghostly had never heard that in this world there was actually such an extremely vicious technique of absorbing spiritual energy. It seemed like the strange thing was naturally the mysterious formation set up in this huge cave and the hidden dragon cauldron in the sky. He couldn't help but hesitate, this vicious four divinities blood formation. He naturally did not have a good impression of it, and among the four spiritual beasts below, three of them had a close relationship with him. Logically speaking, helping these spiritual beasts to escape seemed to be the right thing to do. But he was no longer the simple youth from back then. With a change of thought, he already knew that this formation was so powerful, not to mention that everything before him must have taken Ghost King's countless efforts to set it up. If he acted rashly and spoiled Ghost King's plan, wouldn't that be equivalent to falling out with him? Actually, if it was really only falling out with Ghost King, Ghostly would not have the slightest fear and fall out just like that, but there was still Baiyao lying there, a whole 10 years. Thinking of Baiyao, the light in Ghostly's eyes dimmed, sighed softly, slowly straightened his body, facing Xiao Hui on his shoulder, he silently shook his head. Xiao Hui immediately became anxious, scratched its ears and cheeks, waved its hands, its face full of pleading, clearly wanting Ghostly to save the spiritual beasts below. Ghostly frowned tightly, his face uncertain, his heart also hesitated. At this moment, suddenly a clear voice was heard from behind them. Ghostly and Xiao Hui were shocked, turned their heads at the same time, saw Mr. Ghost dressed in black, without knowing when, had also arrived at the platform behind them, and that ancient celestial magical weapon astrolabe, instead shone with extraordinary splendor, rolling like waves, surging and surging, forming a light pillar around the astrolabe, charging up to the sky, resonating with the mystical light pillar on the hidden dragon cauldron, and the astrolabe in the dazzling light pillar, below it transformed into numerous pure white light petals, one after another connected together, like a lotus throne under the Buddhist bodhisattva, sparkling and translucent, like a crystal, protecting the astrolabe within. Above the astrolabe, in waves of precious light, a golden ancient word lit up, glowing brilliantly, floating and sinking in the light, but this time, the golden word did not dim down, instead it became brighter and brighter. As the golden character shone, as if responding to it, the light dagger that was controlling the hidden dragon cauldron also lit up in mid-air. Ghostly's heart tightened, took a step forward and sternly said, "What are you doing?" But Mr. Ghost seemed to turn a deaf ear to Ghostly's words. His black figure was completely wrapped in the radiance of the astrolabe, a pair of eyes staring intently at the astrolabe. For some reason, he looked less ghostly and more solemn. Under the dazzling radiance of the astrolabe, Mr. Ghost's hand, like Buddha plucking flowers, leisurely drifted through the air, gently pointed at the center of the astrolabe. Almost following his pointing, another golden character leapt out, glowing brightly, gently floating in the radiance above the astrolabe, and Mr. Ghost did not hesitate for a moment. His eyes stared intently at the center of the radiance, as if searching for something. The next moment, he pointed 4 times at the center of the astrolabe. 4 golden characters appeared in succession, the entire astrolabe glowed brightly, the surrounding light pillar had already expanded to more than 2 times, and corresponding to it, the Qian Kuan Lock light pillar on the hidden dragon cauldron in the sky, also abruptly expanded several times and made light sounds, swaying non-stop, showing signs of breaking away from the cauldron. Ghostly's shock was no small matter. Even the stupidest person after the intense battle would know that mysterious light pillar on the evil demon face was the only thing that could restrain that invincible strange power. If this Qian Kuan lock was actually unlocked, the consequences would be unimaginable. Right now he could no longer care about his feelings. In a panic, he dashed towards Mr. Ghost, loudly shouted, "Stop!" Unexpectedly, although his body was as fast as lightning, but when he was 5 chi away from Mr. Ghost and the astrolabe, he was bounced back by a soft but abundant invisible force, and when Ghostly was blocked, Mr. Ghost again pointed at the astrolabe. This time, he seemed to be tapping very slowly. His fingers seemed to be trembling slightly. It was unknown whether it was because he was nervous or because he had concentrated too much power. His trembling fingers reached into the radiance of the astrolabe and paused for a moment. After a moment, there was a soft crisp sound and the 7th golden word slowly rose above the astrolabe. This 7th golden character looked a little bigger than the previous 6 golden characters, and its color was also deeper. After it rose above the astrolabe, it didn't float up and down like the other golden characters. Instead, it rose slowly and was fixed in midair. Following the 7th golden character rising up, the remaining 6 golden characters immediately gathered over, forming a circle around it. Instantly the 7 golden characters shone brightly, converged into a golden light pillar, only the thickness of a finger, charged straight to the Qian Kuan Lock light pillar above the hidden dragon cauldron. In the huge cave which was still turbulent not long ago, right now suddenly fell into a strange silence, everything quietened down, not even breathing, all eyes, Ghostly, Mr. Ghost, Xiao Hui, the spiritual beasts in the blood pool, even that strange existence in the darkness, all held their breath, watching. That was about to happen. "Pa!" A very light crisp sound. The hidden dragon cauldron's Chien Kuan Lock light pillar swiftly dimmed and disappeared, leaving a finger-sized hole in the middle of the evil face's forehead, and the golden light pillar from the astrolabe coincidentally shot into this small hole. After a moment, a bead slowly rolled out from the small hole, dark blue in color, landed in the golden light pillar. The golden beam of light slowly retracted and descended, and the mysterious blue bead also slowly descended, heading towards the astrolabe. When the bead was closer to the ground and could be seen more clearly, one could see that the blue within was like a vast ocean, endless, and a faint mist was locked within, slowly circulating like the rising and falling tides, the sun and the moon moving in the sky, everlasting and everlasting. The golden pillar of light gradually dimmed, and the 7 golden words on the astrolabe also gradually faded before finally disappearing. The dark blue orb that had been taken out floated half a foot above the astrolabe, and it slowly began to spin. The dazzling light pillar around the astrolabe quickly faded, gradually returned to the astrolabe. Very soon, the astrolabe resumed its original appearance, floating in the air, only emitting a faint gentle light. Those small star-like jade pieces in the middle of the astrolabe were still endlessly gliding. The only difference was, above the astrolabe, there was a beautiful blue rotating bead. Looking like the astrolabe was the vault of heaven, all the stars were only revolving around that beautiful dark blue star bead. Heaven and earth's truth, billions of years of time, seemed to at this moment, faintly revealed in this small astrolabe. In the cave, silence, as if everyone was stunned by this magnificent and magical scene, just that, this silence only lasted for a moment. Boom! An indescribable loud roar, brought with it the ecstasy of thousands of years since ancient times. Endless blood light suddenly appeared in this huge cave. Every place was filled with thick blood energy, every corner was filled with whistling red light. The thick smell of blood that could not be dispelled soared into the sky. The hidden dragon cauldron floating high in the sky, countless blood energy crazily surged towards it. On the ancient cauldron, the pale mysterious inscriptions lit up one by one, with a strange rhythm, and turned into blood-red characters. A mysterious and demonic voice sounded in the air, like an old and lonely ancient demon spirit reciting a poem that had been forgotten for thousands of years. Red, blood-red color, like a tide, spread over the entire hidden dragon cauldron, turning it into a shining red monster. Finally, all of the blood energy surrounded the demonic face on the front of the ancient cauldron, starting from the chin, bit by bit corroding upwards. Red lips drowned the nose, swallowed the eyes. In the end, it was as if all the blood chi was roaring at the same time. The entire hidden dragon cauldron also trembled. All the violent blood-light shadows were roaring at the same time in the huge cave. The ear-piercing roars were endless. The blood in the pool of blood started to boil. The ground shook, rocks fell like rain, blood energy surged like an unstoppable flood, permeated through the cave where the little blue pearl was, dyed the entire demonic face red. Rumble! Majestic Fox Mountain, the weather changed, divine thunder descended from the sky, exploded at the peak of the mountain. A strong gale blew, blowing away the huge rocks and dust, desolate heaven and earth, a desolate and austere scene. In the cold stone room in the majestic Fox Mountain cave, the ground and walls shook violently again, rocks falling one after another, but Ghost King seemed to not feel it. Right now, his eyes had already turned completely blood-red, extremely strange. Amidst the trembling stone room and the falling rocks, he slowly raised his right hand and looked at it. At the center of his right palm, a blood-red inscription appeared clearly on the flesh and blood. It was shaped like an ancient cauldron, bold and powerful, and carried a hint of strangeness. Ghost King stared intently at the cauldron-shaped inscription. After a moment, he slowly laughed. His laughter was filled with ruthlessness, carrying some madness, even hysteria. Succeeded, finally succeeded. He panted deeply. His voice had long become hoarse, the muscles on his face contorted. his face as red as blood, looking extremely strange. Suddenly, he clenched his right hand into a fist. In an instant, a powerful force burst forth from his body. One could almost see tiny blood-red lights jumping around his hand like tiny lightning bolts. The surrounding stone walls also seemed to be pulled by a huge force. In an instant, a large portion of them collapsed, and rocks flew everywhere. Ha 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 ha! In the wild laughter, with madness and complacency, Ghost King walked towards the entrance of the stone room. Just that at the entrance, he suddenly stopped. In the madness and ruthlessness on his face, a trace of hesitation suddenly appeared. His body moved slightly, as if he wanted to turn around to look at something. Behind him was Bai Yao's quietly lying body. However, in that short moment of hesitation, Ghost King still did not turn back. The huge hard stone door in front of him suddenly split into pieces and flew out, in the violent earthquake and flying rocks. With wild determination, Ghost King strode out of the cold stone room. Rumble! The violent tremors continued to make strange sounds of collision. The falling rocks became bigger and bigger, as if about to swallow this place. That frail green figure lay quietly on the stone platform, lonely and quiet, with a tinge of sadness. Ding! Ding! The clear sound of a bell quietly echoed in this stone room. However, it was quickly drowned out by the even louder sounds of falling rocks and collapsing rocks. Chapter 484. On the platform of the blood pool, Ghostly and Mr. Ghost both looked up at the hidden dragon cauldron suspended in the air, but their expressions were completely different. Ghostly's eyes behind the veil were filled with shock and astonishment. Mr. Ghost's eyes behind the veil were filled with ecstasy. After losing the heaven and earth lock, the last and most important shackle, the mysterious power on the hidden dragon cauldron seemed to have completely revived. The dark red blood energy surged and churned crazily, and the demon face seemed to have gained life. Light flowed, and a pair of blood-red eyes seemed to have intelligence as they trembled slightly. A formless but terrifying sense of oppression emanated from the air, causing one to be unable to breathe. Ghostly recovered from the shock, turned and angrily shouted at Mr. Ghost, "What did you do?" Mr. Ghost seemed to turn a deaf ear to Ghostly's scolding. His eyes filled with excitement and even some craziness, walked a few steps forward, suddenly knelt down towards the hidden dragon cauldron in the air. Ghostly was stunned, looked in disbelief at that black figure. Under Ghostly's shocked gaze, Mr. Ghost opened his arms, loudly shouted, "Azura!" Boom! A terrifying loud sound rang out, as if a terrifying demon had been awakened from its slumber. It spread out from the hidden dragon cauldron, and the four walls of the cave emitted a cracking sound at the same time. Countless huge rocks crumbled and fell down, and the blood in the huge pool of blood below the cave also seemed to be pulled by a huge force. In the midst of the loud noise, more than 10 water pillars actually shot up into the air. It was strange and spectacular. On the hidden dragon cauldron, an indistinct red shadow appeared. That shadow was faintly discernible, but it was clearly twisting and struggling. It was becoming more and more obvious that it was about to appear here. Even from a distance, Ghostly could clearly, truly feel that terrifying power and the crazy murderous intent in it. He stared deeply at that red figure. His expression changed rapidly, suddenly stamped his feet. His body floated up, swept towards the cave entrance. Although he did not know what kind of divine being this strange thing that was about to be born, the great power contained in it was obviously not something that a human could resist. If the mysterious Qiankuan lock was still there would still be a chance. Now that the Qiankuan lock was broken by the astrolabe, Ghostly made a prompt decision to leave this place after thinking for a while. He was no longer that simple and hot-blooded youth, sacrificing everything for justice. In his heart, maybe he did not fear death, but there was something more important than death. The surrounding earthquake following the appearance of that strange red figure became more and more intense, and also just now, an uneasy feeling surfaced in his heart. This had never happened before in majestic Fox Mountain. Would it endanger Bai Yao? Right now, that uneasiness in his heart grew stronger. He had no intention to continue here, and decided to leave. And the people here, other than him, Mr. Ghost, was completely focused on that mysterious red figure, ignoring Ghost Lee's departure. Under the blood-red light, his eyes also seemed to have turned red. Azura! He raised his hand, loudly called out to the sky. Ghost Lee's figure swept over. Mr. Ghost's strange cries were still heard. His heart was also bewildered. For the past 10 years Mr. Ghost was mysterious and unfathomable in Ghost King's sect, but his skills and knowledge, even he had to be wary of him. Unexpectedly today he turned out to be this strange. While thinking, his figure was extremely fast. He was about to reach the cave entrance and leave this crazy blood pool cave. Unexpectedly, at this moment, a soul-stirring, heart-wrenching cry was heard from behind. The cry was sharp and ear-piercing, filled with fear, despair, disbelief and sorrow, and Ghostly heard it clearly. It was Mr. Ghost's voice. This sudden change, one after another, Ghostly was shocked, involuntarily stopped and turned to look. This look made his entire body shake, sucked in a breath of cold air. Mr. Ghost's black body was still the same as before, kneeling down towards the cauldron and that mysterious red figure on it. But right now his hands, which were originally raised up, slowly drooped down, powerlessly fell to the ground. A huge dark red tentacle, sharp like knives, pierced down from the red figure on the cauldron, like a huge sickle, pierced through Mr. Ghost's back, came out through his chest. The remaining force was still so great that it pierced deeply into the hard ground below. Mr. Ghost, within 6 chi radius, the rocks all cracked. That mysterious red figure used the terrifying sickle-like tentacle, nailed Mr. Ghost to the ground. Blood spurted out from Mr. Ghost's wound, in a blink stained the ground below him. Mr. Ghost panted heavily, his body trembling violently. The next moment, that merciless enormous tentacle suddenly pulled up, retracted. That terrifying force immediately carried the already weak Mr. Ghost up, flipped him into the air. Blood splattered everywhere, streaked across the air, carrying some sorrow. Who would have thought Mr. Ghost, who was released from the Chien Kuan lock, became that mysterious red evil figure's first offering? Ghostly almost subconsciously leapt up, caught Mr. Ghost in the air. The black veil was still on, but it was already dyed dark by the blood he had spat out. Ghostly silently glanced at his chest, and then turned his eyes away. That wound was so huge, almost cut Mr. Ghost into two. Such serious injuries, no matter what, he would not survive. Just a moment ago, the person who was still standing beside him, in a blink had become like this. Ghostly did not know what to say. Carrying Mr. Ghost's body, Ghostly landed back on the platform near the cave entrance, far away from that terrible red figure. Right now Mr. Ghost in his arms was already gasping for air. Just that, and such serious injuries. Suddenly, Mr. Ghost quietly laughed. That laughter was filled with bitterness, filled with self-deprecation and helplessness, and his laughter only lasted for a moment, immediately interrupted by more violent coughing and vomiting blood. Ghostly gently placed him on the ground, and then glanced warily at the mysterious red figure in the distance. The red figure that was wrapped in countless balls of blood energy was constantly twisting and moving, but it did not seem to have the intention to attack the cave entrance, not knowing if it was because of the distance. Ghostly looked back at Mr. Ghost, was silent for a moment, quietly said, "Do you still have anything to say?" Mr. Ghost panted heavily. The light in his eyes had clearly started to dim. His hoarse voice bitterly laughed intermittently. "I have nothing to say. This is all. Heaven's will, retribution. A Ghostly's brows tightly frowned, his expression complicated, although he and Mr. Ghost had always been more hostile than friendly, but at this moment when Mr. Ghost was dying, his mood suddenly became complicated. He wanted to say something to comfort him but could not think of any suitable words to comfort Mr. Ghost. Just when the heavily injured Mr. Ghost's panting gradually faded, suddenly, this dying man seemed to recall something. Not knowing where the strength came from, he suddenly grabbed Ghostly's hand. Ghostly was shocked, looked at him in shock, said, "What is it?" "You go, find. Mr. Ghost was in agony, his voice hoarse, every word seemed to be torturing him, but he still endured, struggled to say his last words to Ghostly. Even if Ghostly had a heart of stone, his countenance also changed, solemnly said, "Tell me, who do you want me to find?" "Find Xiao Huan." Ghostly's body shook. No matter what, he would never expect Mr. Ghost to suddenly say such words before his death. With a disbelieving tone, asked in shock, "Find Xiao Huan? Find her for what?" Mr. Ghost's grip on Ghostly's hand slowly weakened, but he still struggled to speak word by word. "Ask her to save. After saying the word save, Mr. Ghost seemed to have exhausted all his strength, the light in his eyes dimmed. His entire body also slowly slumped down, even his panting gradually could not be heard. Ghostly and Xiao Huan's relationship was not shallow. He had always been very fond of this young lady, felt like she was his younger sister. Right now, hearing Mr. Ghost's last words were actually related to Xiao Huan, and looking at Mr. Ghost's struggle to speak, clearly it was an important matter, but Mr. Ghost looked like he was about to pass away halfway through his words. Ghostly panicked, leaned down and placed his ear near Mr. Ghost's lips, loudly said, "Who are you asking Xiao Huan to save? Quickly say." Mr. Ghost's lips moved, as if he heard Ghostly's shouts, panted rapidly a few times, and then, using a voice that Ghostly could barely hear, struggled to speak the last words, "Save Qing Yun Rear Mountain." Towards the end, it gradually became inaudible. When he finally spat out an almost inaudible "mountain," Mr. Ghost's body suddenly trembled, and then his body relaxed. His breathing stopped, he passed away. Ghostly was stunned for a moment, slowly placed Mr. Ghost's body on the ground, his mind full of questions. Qing Yun Rear Mountain? But what did that mean? If he did not hear wrongly, then Mr. Ghost's last words should be referring to Qing Yun Hill, just that Qing Yun Hill mountain range, stretched for thousands of miles, the mountain ranges undulating. Where did this rear mountain come from? Qing Yun's sect occupied the highest 7 peaks, and each peak had its so-called back mountain, but to save Qing Yun's back mountain, what was it referring to? Mr. Ghost passed away halfway through his words. Ghostly, after a moment, sighed, glanced at the dead Mr. Ghost, saw his eyes were still half opened. He closed his eyes, quietly said, "If I have the chance to meet Xiao Huan, I will help you to pass on these words. Just that your words are without rhyme or reason, I'm afraid she won't be able to understand." After speaking, he stood up, looked up and glanced far away. The red figure on the cauldron was about to reveal itself, its entire body red like blood, but its head was still shrouded in a ball of blood air, unable to be seen clearly. Ghostly frowned, unwilling to delay any longer, turned and was about to leave. Suddenly his heart pounded, his footsteps paused again. In that instant, a thought suddenly emerged in his mind, like an irresistible temptation. He turned and looked at Mr. Ghost's body again. On the black figure, the black veil was still veiled. Ghostly stared at that veil for a moment, suddenly wanted to lift that veil, see what kind of face was inside. Just that, after a moment, he finally gave up on that thought, turned and left. When Ghostly left the blood pool cave, Xiao Hui on his shoulder was still quietly calling out. Ghostly was silent, although he could not bear to see the 4 spiritual beasts in the blood pool, but right now that place behind him was really the most dangerous place in the world. Even with his current skills, Ghostly asked himself if he had any chance of winning against that terrifying mysterious power. The surrounding stone walls and ground were still shaking, although he knew that Ghost King was personally guarding Bai Yao and nothing would happen, but Ghostly still felt anxious. This was a disaster he had never encountered before, and clearly right now that strange formation set up by Ghost King was showing signs of breaking free. At least Mr. Ghost was the best example. No matter what, even if Ghost King objected, it was better to bring Bai Yao away first. Right now, Majestic Fox Mountain was really too dangerous. Ghostly calculated in his heart. His figure also sped up, swept past the path he came from. In a blink he had reached that fork in the path. He was about to enter that cave entrance. suddenly his body stopped. He discovered that deep inside the dark cave, a red light flashed, and that red light was swiftly heading towards his direction. Chapter 485. Ghost Lee's heart was moved. For some reason, he seemed to subconsciously. His body turned and flashed into another tunnel, hiding in a dark corner with his back against the wall, holding his breath, at the same time quietly hugged Xiao Hui, using his hand to cover its mouth. Xiao Hui was already intelligent, seemed to understand something and immediately quietened down, crouched in Ghost Lee's arms and did not move. The passageway fell into silence, but this silence did not last long. After a moment, a sudden whistling sound came from the passageway, mixed with heavy panting. For some reason, it sounded more like a beast than a human. "Pa!" A tall figure swept out from the passageway, landed on the ground, looking from the back. That figure was Ghost King, but the person in front of him right now was completely different from the usual Ghost King. The clothes on his body were somewhat tattered. Looking at his limbs and torso, there was a strange feeling that he was a size bigger than usual. The Ghost King's body was constantly emitting a deep crackling sound. It was unknown what it was, but there was an extremely familiar scent wafting from his body. A thick smell of blood. Ghostly in the dark corner, coldly watched that figure. Ghost King did not stay where he was for too long. After he landed, he looked around and walked towards the red light at the end of the platform. He walked very quickly, very anxiously, as if there was something he eagerly desired waiting for him in front of him. He did not even carefully examine the strange bloodstains on the ground around him. When Ghost King's figure disappeared into that dark red flickering cave, Ghostly unhurriedly walked out from the darkness. He stared at that place, a strange glint flashed in his eyes, not knowing what he was thinking. Xiao Hui slowly climbed up from his arms, sat on his shoulder, quietly called out twice. Ghostly was silent for a moment, was about to turn, but suddenly his body shook. His countenance changed greatly. Right now this majestic Fox Mountain was shaking, the situation was strange, danger was everywhere, and at this moment, Ghost King came here alone, and clearly there was an evil energy around him, very different from usual. But, Bai Yao, at this moment, Ghost King had gone to the blood pool. Who would be protecting Bai Yao? Ghost Lee's face instantly turned pale. His mind buzzed. Where would he dare to hesitate? Like lightning he suddenly leapt up, darted into that tunnel, sped away. Along the way, he kept chanting in his heart, Bai Yao, Bai Yao, you must be all right. The entire majestic Fox Mountain was shaking. This was the feeling in Ghost Lee's heart. Until now, the duration of the earthquake this time had already far exceeded the past, and right now there was no sign of it stopping. On the contrary, the tremors under his feet and the surrounding walls were still intensifying. Strange collapsing sounds were heard far and near, making one tremble with fear. After Ghostly swept out of that secret tunnel, dashed out of Ghost King's stone chamber, that stretch of Ghost King Sek's tunnels before him were already destroyed beyond recognition. Rocks were falling from the stone walls everywhere. The originally unobstructed passage had turned into a crooked path filled with potholes and piles of rocks. More and more rocks, bigger and bigger, were falling from the stone walls. Intense rumbling sounds came from the depths of the mountain, mixed with the earthquake, causing people to feel the unknown terror. As Ghostly swept out, he soon discovered from those interconnected tunnels innumerable Ghost King sect disciples like frantic and fearful ants, disregarding everything, all ran towards the cave exit. This sect's strict rules, at this moment of life and death, finally lost all its effect. No one cared about it anymore. The crowd gathered into a river. Ghost Lee's anxious steps were soon blocked by the crowd. At this moment, everyone was running for their lives. No one cared about his vice sect leader title. No one made way for him. Other than people, it was still people. Ghostly, who was burning with anxiety, strode forward, pushed aside the bodies in front of him, and squeezed forward. However, in front of him, it was still people, and very soon, behind Ghostly, a large group of fleeing Ghost King sect disciples gathered. He was like an angry little fish in a huge shoal of fish in the deep sea, desperately struggling and pushing his way out. However, the crowd he was in was so crowded that even a few feet above the people's heads, he could see human bodies from time to time. Bai Yao, under his feet, there was another violent tremor. This tremor was so strong that all the people in the crowd involuntarily fell to the side. In the midst of panic, there were cries of fear and loud roars everywhere. There were also cries of pain coming from all directions. Among the crazy people, someone fell and was trampled to death in pain and fear. Ghost Li's eyes were bloodshot, his mouth dry. His mind even felt slightly dizzy. Ahead, what was waiting for him? What would it be? Bai Yao, in his heart, he shouted with all his might. With great difficulty, he followed the crowd and squeezed through this passage. Ghost Li turned at a fork. The cold stone chamber and Ghost King's chamber were quite a distance apart. Right now he only needed to turn back along this path and walk to the end. However, Ghost Li's body had just turned around and looked ahead. His body stopped, his face showed some despair. On this path, there were also numerous Ghost King sect disciples squeezing together, trying their best to escape. The path just now, although Ghost Li was moving slowly, but he was still moving with the flow. Right now he had to go against the crowd. Looking at the faces of the people who were almost crazed because of fear, Ghost Li's heart sank. The earth quaked and the mountains shook, strange noises repeated. People continued to escape in madness and despair, and behind the crowd, in that lonely stone chamber, how was that person? Was she hurt by the stones? Did she see a man shouting loudly in the crowd, with a kind of craziness similar to the surrounding people who were fleeing, desperately rushing against the flow, towards the cold stone room where she was, inch by inch nearer. Rumble! A loud sound exploded behind the crowd. Under the violent tremors, a huge crack on the stone wall cracked like the skin of a watermelon, collapsing and shattering. One of the boulders, which was almost the size of the entire passageway, smashed into the crowd. In an instant blood flashed and blood splattered. More than 10 people had died just like that, and it was unknown how many were injured. While they were shocked, the terrified crowd rushed forward with all their might. The path of escape was blocked by the huge rocks, and the terrified people behind the rocks let out cries of despair. Under the huge stone, bright red blood flowed, staining a large area of the ground. Despair pervaded the crowd. People pushed and hit that huge stone with all their might. However, the hard and huge stone was not what they could move. It still remained cold and motionless. The earthquakes and distant deafening sounds, carrying the smell of death, seemed to be nearing. At this moment, the person closest to the boulder suddenly felt a cold light coming from the front. A moment later, the boulder suddenly trembled slightly. Then, the trembling quickly became more intense, and a series of explosive sounds burst out from within the boulder. Rumble! With a loud bang, the boulder was shattered into pieces. Large pieces of gravel fell down amidst the flying smoke and dust. However, the crowd was overjoyed. How could they care so much? They lifted their feet and were about to continue rushing forward. Cough, 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 cough. A series of light coughs came from behind the flying dust in front of them. A figure seemed to be staggering as he slowly walked over. The dust landed on his face and shoulders, but he did not reach out to wipe it off. His pale face was flushed with a strange redness, as if he had expended too much effort. Ghostly. What welcomed him was pairs of surprised eyes, but no one thanked him. Before they could thank him, their minds were once again occupied by the thought of escaping. The crowd was stirred, and the people in front were already running over. The scene of the crowd just now was about to happen again. Stop! A deafening shout suddenly came from Ghost Li, who was standing in the dust. The people in front abruptly stopped. At this moment, Ghost Li's so-called vice-sect leader status could no longer restrict them. What could make them fear was only the same threat of death. The man with red eyes held the soul-absorbing orb in his hand. The sinister orb glimmered with traces of bloodlight. It was operating to the extreme. The cold, murderous intent, like the tide, surged over. the same cold words came out from his body. "Whoever dares to block my way again, the stone just now will be your outcome." The crowd was stunned, the billowing dust made everyone believe in Ghost Lee's danger, and his eyes carried a crazy blood-red glow, made everyone unable to ignore his threat. Quietly, the crowd made a narrow path for him, only allowing one person to pass through. It was too small, but it was already the limit. Ghostly did not say anything. He strode forward, squeezed into the crowd, ran towards the direction of the cold stone room. Ahead, at the end of the crowd, there was another person, waiting for him. No matter what, he must go over. He clenched his teeth tightly, and a thin line of blood flowed out of his lips unknowingly. He looked rather terrifying, and no one around him was willing to look him in the eye. Everyone avoided him, as if he was an evil spirit. Just that Ghostly did not care. He just ran with all his might, pushing aside everyone in front of him, following that narrow path which seemed like it would be drowned by the crowd at any time, ran with big strides, going against the flow. In this world, how many people were worth caring for? Suddenly, from the depths of the ground, came the rumbling of thunder again. A moment later, another wave of violent earthquake struck, the stone walls trembled violently, large pieces of rocks fell one after another, mercilessly smashing into the crowd, people crying everywhere. In the blink of an eye, the violent tremors made it almost impossible for people to stand, people swaying left and right could be seen everywhere. No one knew who was the first to suddenly shout in extreme fear, recklessly rushing forward. A moment later, everyone did the same thing, completely forgetting all other dangers. The small path which was already in danger, immediately turned into nothingness. Countless people flocked over, turning into a terrifying torrent, immediately enveloping Ghostly within, desperately rushing towards another direction. Ghost Lee's eyes were about to split open. With a loud roar, the murderous aura around him intensified. His left hand suddenly stretched out, like grabbing a little chick, immediately grabbed a fleeing Ghost King sect disciple and pulled him in front of him. At the same time his right hand raised the soul-absorbing stick high up, about to strike down, to kill, to establish his might. In the faint red light, the sinister orb glimmered with demonic light, illuminating that terrified young face. He was a youth in his teens, his face pale, his body trembling incessantly because of the extreme fear, his teeth chattering. Only a pair of eyes still flashed with light, that little bit of weak light. That was the remnant instinctive desire to live. That instant seemed to freeze, the cold murderous intent and the madness in his heart, the faint light from the soul-absorbing stick, in the crowd, at the end of the crowd, who was watching from afar. The blood-red light quietly faded from Ghost Lee's eyes, replacing it, suddenly were indistinct tears. He released his hand. He let go of that cowering youth. Suddenly, with a loud roar, the soul-absorbing stick, like the wind, stabbed out, broke the stone and pierced into the hard stone wall beside. Ghostly tightly held onto the soul-absorbing stick, stuck close to the stone wall, buried his head deep into the darkness. The stream of people was like a surging tide, gushing past behind him. Countless bodies squeezed him, pressed on him, collided with him, and crushed him. However, he endured it without moving, as if he had transformed into a lifeless rock, silently waiting. That youth was swept up by the crowd, involuntarily surging forward. However, in that surging tide, he kept turning his head back, a strange glint in his young eyes. In the midst of the crowd, he desperately searched for that lonely and persevering figure. Just that figure very quickly disappeared in the crowd, could not be seen anymore. Chapter 486. After an unknown amount of time, amidst the chaos, the terrifying wave of fleeing people finally passed. In the dispersed dust, a figure slowly propped himself up from the stone wall, was about to step forward. Suddenly his legs gave way, almost fell down. Ghostly inhaled a deep breath, clenched his teeth and finally held on. The clothes on his body, especially on his back, right now was already in tatters, as if numerous wild beasts had trampled over it. Even with his skills, His face was also extremely pale and ugly. But he did not have the intention to stop and rest. On the contrary, the anxiety on his face intensified. There were no more people before him. He moved, stumbled towards the end of the tunnel. Bai Yao, for some reason, there seemed to be some darkness ahead. He panted, ran in the tunnel. The surrounding stone walls were getting more and more damaged, collapsed rocks everywhere, and these reflected in Ghost Li's eyes, only increased the anxiety in his heart. Finally, he saw the entrance of the icy stone room from afar, but was immediately startled. His face paled again, looking from afar. He clearly remembered that there was a newly installed stone door, but right now it was a pile of rubble and rubble scattered on the ground. Could it be? Ghostly did not dare to think any more. He could only stride with all his strength. Suddenly, the moment he moved, without any warning, the strange rumbling sounds and violent quakes in the depths of majestic Fox Mountain instantly stopped. A moment ago it was still a frenzied din. The next moment it was a strange silence. The contrast was too strong, almost impossible to accept. Ghost Li's body paused in the air for a moment but still ran forward. In this sudden silence, in the long tunnel, only a lonely figure was left, speeding towards the depths of the mountain. And behind him, the deep darkness slowly surged up, rolling over without any sound. He dashed to the stone chamber entrance, grabbed the solid door frame. His knuckles turned white from the force, looked inside. This world was still, silent, no sound or scene existed. In his eyes, there was only the cold stone chamber, that empty stone platform. It was an empty stone platform. As if he was suddenly drained of all his strength, his body slumped down, the sky and earth spinning, the entire world seemed to be spinning and trembling, that only shout reverberated desperately in his mind. Bai Yao or Ghostly blankly stood up, slowly walked into the stone chamber. Because of the numerous violent quakes, this cold stone chamber was already in a state of devastation. Rocks and stones were everywhere, the four walls were cracked, large and small cracks, even the usually clean floor, had long accumulated a thick layer of dust. Even near the currently empty ice stone platform, there were a dozen large and small rocks, a few of them even directly smashed into the stone platform. Everything before him seemed to have turned into sharp knives, fiercely stabbing into Ghost Li's heart. He staggered as he walked, panting heavily, his body on the verge of collapse. Suddenly, his eyes swept past a certain place in the stone chamber, suddenly froze. The next moment, his body started to tremble. That was the most damaged corner of the cold stone chamber. The rocks that fell had piled up into a small hill, and below the pile of rocks, under a large rock, revealed a corner of green clothes. Green, a corner of clothes. Suddenly, he rushed over like a madman and threw himself in front of the pile of rock. He pushed aside the rocks and dug with all his might. The sharp edges of the rocks cut his palms until they were dripping with blood, but he didn't seem to feel it at all. Finally, he moved the last and biggest huge rock, then he was stunned. Slowly, he squatted down. In front of him was a corner of a green clothes. Just a corner of a green clothes. His eyes slowly moved, looked at the surroundings of the clothes on the dusty ground. Strangely, there were many footprints. These footprints were big and small, but Ghostly clearly knew these things should not appear here. The cold stone chamber, in the entire Ghost King sect, only he and Ghost King could come here. The others who could come, like Mr. Ghost, were either with him or were not in majestic Fox Mountain right now. Then in such a chaotic situation where everyone was running for their lives, why would there still be someone sneaking in here? The next moment, Ghost Li's face suddenly turned pale, almost subconsciously. He had already thought of the answer. He Huan Bell. In the evil sect, everyone knew that He Huan Bell was the rare evil sect treasure, even comparable to Old Man Blackheart's sinister orb at the peak of the evil sect. In greed, could it be? Ghostly didn't continue thinking about it. His mind instantly went blank. Deep in his heart, something quietly broke, shattered. That was the last pillar that held his heart together. thin as a gossamer but carrying 1,000 caddies of heavy burden. What was all gone? Finally, there was nothing left. Like a dream, that green figure suddenly appeared in his mind. Her smile was always so beautiful and gentle. The surroundings became colder and colder. The chill assaulted from all directions. Only that figure was warm. That smile was the last warmth in his heart. Just that, slowly, the figure faded, gradually disappeared. Even the remaining warmth also slowly disappeared. The deathly silent coldness was like an icy tide from an unknown place in his memory. It surged over and swallowed him. Baiyao. His last call in his heart was this name. The next moment, he fainted. His entire body fell heavily, crashing onto the ground, kicking up a few clouds of dust. In the entire Ghost King sect cave, right now there was not a single figure. In the strange silence, suddenly, deep below majestic Fox Mountain, an earth-shattering deafening sound was heard. Rumble. In that instant, the entire majestic Fox Mountain started to shake violently. A huge force fermented violently from deep underground. Everywhere the stone walls were collapsing, numerous cracks on the ground, and this time, in those cracks, a terrible red light seeped out. The stench of blood pervaded every corner. More and more of the ground, like it could not withstand the corrosion of that terrible force, started to collapse. The red light became brighter and brighter, bigger and bigger, until the end, even the entire stone walls, started to collapse and fall down, falling into that red light. Terrible roars and crazy laughter, like a devil resurrected from the abyss, reverberated in the depths of the red light. Gradually, a huge and deep hole was formed. Red blood light shot out from the big hole, and around the edge of the deep hole, more and more stones on the ground collapsed, constantly expanding the terrifying deep hole. In the distant cold stone chamber, the stone walls were also shaking violently. Stones kept falling down. Some of them heavily hit Ghost Lee's body on the ground, but his body did not move, did not have the slightest reaction. Outside the stone chamber, the terrible force seemed to be walking over step by step. And at this moment, suddenly, a white figure appeared at the entrance of the cold stone chamber. It was Xiao Bai. Her brows were tightly furrowed and her face was solemn. She took a glance at the stone chamber, and when she saw that the stone platform was empty, her face instantly turned pale. Then she saw Ghost Lee had already fainted on the other side of the stone chamber. Without further hesitation, Xiao Bai had already dashed over, pulled Ghost Lee's body over. What appeared before her was a pale and despaired face, cold to the touch, almost made Xiao Bai thought that she was hugging a dead person. She clenched her teeth tightly. The corner of her eyes glanced around and suddenly saw Ghost Lee clutching something tightly in his hand. It was a torn piece of green clothes. Her thoughts turned and already understood 70–80% of it. Immediately her eyes also turned red. Rumble! 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 However, this cruel world did not even allow them to feel sorrow. Deafening sounds once again erupted from below majestic Fox Mountain. After a series of violent tremors, Xiao Bai suddenly felt the ground beneath her trembling, slowly caving in. Red light crazily surged out from the cracks, carrying with it an extremely scorching air current. What flowed beneath her feet seemed to be the hottest magma. Xiao Bai was shocked, lightly shouted, carried Ghost Lee's body, both feet tapped on a falling stone, flew out of the cold stone chamber. Just a moment later, the cold stone chamber had already collapsed, fell into that terrible red light. But after going out, Xiao Bai's face turned pale again. The situation outside was worse than in the cold stone chamber. The huge crater was already expanding at an increasing speed. Right now not only the ground, the surrounding stone walls and even the huge stones above them were all falling. Xiao Bai leapt and dashed between the remaining stones, occasionally looked down, saw the endless red light, extremely scorching. As expected, large amounts of magma were flowing violently in the red light. There were fewer and fewer places to land. The remaining bit was also quickly collapsing. Xiao Bai clenched her teeth, carried Ghost Lee's body and dashed. At this moment of life and death, hanging by a thread, suddenly Xiao Bai felt a faint light coming from above her head. She quickly looked up, saw the thick rocks above her head. After a large area collapsed, in the doomsday-like scene of huge rocks falling like rain, there were a few narrow gaps where light from the sky shone through. Could it be that the entire majestic Fox Mountain was about to collapse, revealing a hole above? A look of determination flashed across Xiao Bai's face. With a heavy push of his feet, he leaped up from the last remaining rock supporting him and flew upwards. The rock under his feet finally collapsed and fell into the red shadow. There was no way out anymore. The scarlet red-hot magma, like an angry giant, started to roar, slowly surged up, churned and surged. Below the magma, there seemed to be an enormous force supporting it. The next moment, the scorching magma exploded, turned into an enormous current, charged up. The white figure was in the middle of a crazy scene. Below it was a blazing torrent of lava, and above it was a dense rain of huge rocks. Little White was like a white bird, flapping its wings and flying in the wild storm, desperately flying towards the sky. Heaven and earth changed color, dark clouds rolled. Once the tallest mountain in the radius of 100 miles, right now, majestic Fox Mountain in a deafening sound and dust, slowly collapsed. The earth was trembling violently, as if that force, even heaven and earth feared it. In the deafening sound, in the dust that shot up to several hundred zhang high, the scorching hot huge current of magma rushed out from the ground, spurted towards the firmament, and in this spectacular scene, beside that huge current of magma, a small white figure at the last moment, finally flew out of that hell-like mountain pass towards the distance. You're tuning in to the Phoenix Nights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.